We open our work session to order. Tyler, will you please call the roll?
Counselor Pietzel.
Here.
Counselor Smallwood.
Here.
Counselor Hamlin.
Present.
Counselor Lee.
Here.
Counselor Exner.
Yo.
Counselor Schultz.
Here.
And Mayor Pulliam.
Yo. Yeah, here.
I just watched that cowboy movies. Yes,
That's
but
what cowboys
yo.
are saying these days. Or
I
yo.
don't think
It's an old cowboy movie.
Howdy.
Howdy.
All right.
Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, try it.
You bunch of losers.
Yo, make my day. All right, so per usual, we'll do our quick agenda review, and then we'll go into our wastewater treatment plant operations update. So remember, as I go through this review, if you have any questions or things you want to have staff start looking over before we go into our meeting tonight, please speak up or forever hold your peace. So obviously we'll go through our regular stuff of our roll call, changes to the agenda, public comment. Then we'll have a presentation on the 2020 census and our efforts to get the best count possible. Any questions on that? Okay. Then we'll have our consent agenda. On that tonight is our Clackamas County IGA with SandyNet that we discussed at our last council work session. That'll be quick items. Is there any questions we had on that IGA from the last
I thought we already approved it at the last meeting. It
Yeah.
wasn't during the.
Well, it was presented to us in, I believe, if I remember, it was in
We
the
voted.
work session.
Yeah, let me confuse you a little bit more.
This is a new one though, isn't it?
This is a new one.
Yeah.
So this is actually a construction contract to do
Oh.
a fiber conduit on
Yeah.
Kelso Road.
Yes, yes.
The county's extending their CBX, and they thought it'd be a good opportunity for us to partner to for us to extend our infrastructure out there.
Okay.
So we put that on consent. It's basically it's a minimal amount for us. In fact, we may even be able to squeeze some dollars out of it, but it's a good opportunity for us to get a chance to put some conduit out and fiber out in that area.
Someone else pay for it.
Yep.
Any questions on that? Okay. Under new business, we'll go into a public hearing on our wastewater facilities plan. And then we'll go into a proposed wastewater rate increase. So we'll be doing our first day for a public hearing on that. When we come to the end of that, I'll eventually be looking for a motion to continue that public hearing on to our next meeting, so that we're not making a decision on that tonight. With that, we'll go into our report from the city manager and our committee and council reports. And
Mayor,
Adjourn.
before we move on, real
Yes.
quick, I just slipped me. When we had the last time looking at the water utility rates increases, we had this slick little program.
Yeah.
Are we gonna have that tonight? Be able to-
Yeah, we can pull that up if you like.
Okay. So it had the way to play with it in terms of
Mhm.
how much increases just to makes, okay, good. That's all I have, thanks.
Is the Sandy Post going to print a retraction about the rates?
Well, I'm not the, I don't know, I'm not the Sandy
Someone
Post.
else?
But I do believe there's been some conversations between, city staff and the Sandy Post to make any corrections.
Yeah, they're gonna correct it this week.
Okay. All right, moving on, let's get to our, wastewater treatment plant operations, update.
So I'd just like to introduce Melissa Sandoval, Mike Green, and Tom Rutherford with Veolia. And they prepared a little presentation tonight on where we're at with the O&M at the treatment plant, what we started with, and what progress they've made. We've been on the job for 6 months now, and it's been a kind of a steep learning curve. The prior contractor didn't really leave a lot of information that would help with continuity changeover, and so they got up to speed, and then Mike will give the council some information on where we're at and what they've done in the last 6 months.
Thank
Come
you.
on up,
Okay.
Mike.
How do I,
Yeah, just sit there.
oh, okay. No, as Mike already introduced, my name is Mike Green. I'm a general manager for water projects for Veolia in the Northwest. And I'm just gonna go through a fairly brief presentation of the condition of the wastewater treatment plant. We took over operation of the wastewater and water plant. Most of this is geared towards the wastewater plant. That's where we've encountered a lot of problems. That doesn't mean there isn't problems at the water plant. It's just that nothing is at critical mass there at this time. Okay, so let's okay, got it.
I'm sorry, I was gonna wait till the very end for questions, but you just said some So as I was reading through the report, there was some items about the water treatment plan. And so I guess my question is it rising to a point of criticalness that we need to begin to focus on? Or is it just not to the point where, as bad as our wastewater is, so we're prioritizing it? Right?
Yes to that. We don't have any big regulatory issues right now with the water system.
Mhm.
There is the Portland supply, so we have a backup there. But right now, as one of the slides shows, there's 3 filters up there, 3 filter units. This is a combined filter and sedimentation basin. Of those 3, only 2 are out of service. They're not operable. And the one that is in service has limited functionality. The internal controls are not functional. It's making water, and it turns on based on one of the reservoir levels. But that's about it. We have to backwash it manually and do those other things that would be in automatic mode. So when I get to that slide, I
Appreciate that, thank you.
So we're just gonna go through, basically, we submitted a 3-month operations plan prior to March 1. We began operations in March 1. We submitted that plan to the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality and the city of Sandy. And I'm gonna go through a couple of elements of that plan. I'm not gonna go through everything that was in it. Basically, I'm gonna be looking at the condition assessment, or what we've encountered so far, and at least one of the bigger items, the cleaning of the aeration basin. There are other items in there, it's just that I can't, I'd probably be here a lot longer if I went through everything. Okay, we submitted the plan. I think we submitted that in February 15th or something, and the milestones and objectives, we'll just go over some of those. We had to establish a local area network for the controls of the plant. This isn't just so we can communicate and email back and forth among staff, but so that we can see the water plant and the wastewater plant. We can see as many features that we're able to see on a computer screen. So we set that up, or we had somebody set it up, a Veolia person, and then we started in on the condition assessment. That was a big part of that plan. The initial phase is complete. A condition assessment is like ongoing. It never stops. You're always evaluating the condition because it changes. So what we focused on initially was the most critical assets at the wastewater plant. Water plant too, but the wastewater plant was our biggest concern, because quite frankly, there was a number of things that just weren't working. It's extremely difficult to impossible to be compliant with the regulatory requirements when your plant doesn't work. So, the maintenance management system. This is a big deal for us. This is where we go in and we record everything, all of the pieces of machinery or assets. We assign numbers to them. We put them in the system. We look at the owner equipment manuals, and we take things out of that for routine maintenance, like it might say you need to change the oil in this piece of machinery every 6 months. We put that in our maintenance management database, then it automatically generates work orders. We go out and we change the oil, take it back, we close the work order, and then when things come up that are more corrective in nature, we'll generate a work order that's not part of the system, then it's not automatically generated. That's considered a corrective maintenance. So we've established the database, and especially for the critical assets, and as time goes on, we'll just keep adding to that. So that is completed. Our process control management plan. This is a big deal for us at Veolia. We entered all the data that we have, and as Mike said, when we got here, we had no previous operational data, so we started off square one, and we developed, we look at trends, like for dissolved oxygen. I'll just use an example. What's the trend? Not necessarily discrete points, but what the trend is. And once we get a database established, then we'll statistically go in and establish the limits to our, like at DO, you don't want it to go above this and you don't want it to go below that. We establish that statistically, usually within one standard deviation of the mean of those data. And then we try to keep it as tight as possible. We don't want huge swings in our output variables or our input variables. So the process control management plan is established, but
we're still working on data. All of our data starts from March 1. You know, typically you're gonna want seasonal data. You know, your sludge age, for instance, will be less in the warm weather months than it is in the cold weather months. So we're just, it'll take us a while before we can have a lot of confidence in that. Just the more data, the more confidence. So we did perform a condition assessment. That's complete, at least for the critical items. And we were going to evaluate the secondary process. The secondary process at the wastewater plant is the heart of the plant, and that was, it appeared to not be performing very well. So we took down an aeration basin. We were one-sided, there's 2 aeration basins there. We took one down. That's been, when did you take that down, Tom? About a month ago? So
Yeah.
what normally would take a short period of time took us, we're still doing it. And the reason is that when we opened that up and we got into it, there were so many broken things, main air valves that are, need to be replaced, big pieces of air piping that were broken, sheared off, that had to be replaced. That's the unforeseen issues.
Is that a common thing when you do maintenance on that you see, or is that just from neglect from previous operators?
Neglect. No, that's not a common thing. If your aeration basin, if the diffusers are blinded off and there's big pieces of air piping that are broken, your process isn't working right. The integrity of the process is not there. So that's not normal. That's the kind of stuff that leads to violations. Because your process has to be working, the integrity has to be good. That's why we're all about maintenance management and evaluating our processes on a very.
That's why I asked,
basis.
because I'm evaluating the difference and want to know.
Yeah.
I'm not the expert in that, you are. So.
Yeah. So just to kind of summarize, there were significant components at the wastewater plant and water plant, but this is wastewater, that were in the plant automation system. For example, I'll just use one example. In the aeration basin, there should be instrumentation in there that says what your dissolved oxygen is, and when that dissolved oxygen changes, this control loop will change the amount of air that's being provided by the blowers. Well, that wasn't working. It's still not working. There was obsolete and unsupported components. You know, if this stuff gets old and you want to find a replacement part for an instrument, you just can't find it. It might be on eBay or something. You know, that's not a good way to do it. So there's a lot of electrical, mechanical systems failed. Some had been disabled. Some had been bypassed like in one of the electrical panels. There were some components that were just bypassed. You know, jumper cables around solenoids and things like that, which kind of hard. And the belt press. The belt press is this is a huge piece of the importance of this belt press. I can't emphasize it enough. You got to get the solids out of the plant. So there was no spare belt. The belt that was there, the integrity, as I drew a circle around it, there was a huge hole in it. We bought 2 new belts, put 1 belt on. That was an easy process, wasn't it?
That was the first day we showed up. The belt press was, we were full of solids, the bucket was almost full, and the belt was broken, but it keeps coming from Sandy. So there's no stopping it.
It just keeps on coming. There's
that
no
was
stopping.
That was kind of the first day. It was
Yeah.
the first couple of days.
Yeah, Tom and his crew have been busy out there. This is just, I don't need to spend too much time on this. The one on the left, this shows some of the bypass components. You probably can't even, it probably doesn't make sense to you, but this is how it's supposed to look. That's the way Tom fixed it too. We try to fix things right. And this is the UV disinfection, and that was not functioning well when we came in March 1, and we were still in wintertime flow, so we were discharging into Tickle Creek, and this is extremely important, and it was failing, and only one side of it was working. They had apparently cannibalized parts off the 2 sides. You should be able to run them in series and get a better disinfection, but I believe they took working components off one side and put them on the other and made that one work. But that gave us no redundancy. And that leads to violations for coliforms. Now, both banks are currently operable. The Trojan people who came out this summer, they worked on it, it's working fine. Or at least, have you tried it, Tom?
And we tried it for test, but November 1 is
Yeah.
when we started, so we've got the parts and we did the work, so. And it's been tested, so we should be in good shape.
In the plant, we use treated water to provide water for a lot of different processes that depend on that, including the solids process I just talked about. I don't know how they were even getting water out of this. The discharge head had sheared off. And there's two pumps and the check valve had failed, so long story short, we couldn't pressurize the system. So immediately, like within the first week, we replaced one pump, and then we took the other one out to evaluate it. It was no good either,
That was
so we.
that was part of pressing, so, again, it's dramatic because the sludge keeps coming. and it's
Yeah.
Doesn't stop.
We'd like it to, but it doesn't.
No.
And there isn't a whole lot to say about these are hydropneumatic tanks. They look just fine, but internally they're not functioning right. We have a quote to fix that. This is the aeration basin project that we started, and the city's been helping us out. That's the city Vector truck there, and we're moving along in spite of all the broken things and the extended time it's taking. Hopefully we'll get the other one done. And you can see these are diffusers. They diffuse air into the process. Right? That is the activated sludge process. And a lot of these, now some of this was sludge that as we dewatered the basin it went down, but there's a lot of grit on these. That the headworks that removes grit wasn't operating the way it should be when we got there. There was components that had failed, and there was a lot of sand, debris, and things like that that were ending up in the aeration basin. And then when we dewatered the aeration basin, a lot of that stuff mobilized and plugged up the secondary clarifiers. So Tom and his crew were out this weekend on Sunday waiting with waders on.
We have fly fishing gear, but
But it wasn't
fly
a
fishing.
pristine stream. It was like about
Brown trout.
2,000 milligrams per liter.
You have a lot of flag over there.
It's we have hepatitis shots.
Yeah, right. Question, how often do you normally clean that in a year, or every 2 years, or every year? Every 6 months?
Typically, you'd wanna dewater it and inspect it. I think on a 2 or 3 year cycle. Some places are different. Like, let's say you open it up and it's good, everything's good. So that would change your cycle. Maybe you can extend your cycle, or if it's really bad, you might wanna make it every year.
Do we
It
have
just
records
depends.
of when the last time that was done for this?
I have
That's
no
part of
idea.
what we don't have is any of the maintenance records of any of the
Yeah.
maintenance that occurred, when it occurred, if it occurred. So
I-
like Mike said, we started at ground zero.
Yeah. But I think, now I have one slide in here that shows.
How long was the previous operator there, Mike?
15 years.
That's
And
a
the-
deeper hole than I thought it would be.
Deeper than we thought too. We had to buy a special ladder for that. But these are extreme conditions. We consider that's a confined space, and we have a well-developed safety program. So, but here's the broken pipe. So, okay, this is a main. That's a 4-inch pipe that. If that was broken off, I see, I don't know, how did the air get to other diffusers? It would all short circuit through that, but they must have known about it because they valved it off. So this wasn't operational, and there was no air being supplied to that part of the aeration basin for I don't know how long.
So they cobbled that together? So you.
No,
No, they just disabled it. They took it out of play. They didn't, I wish they had cobbled it together with something,
So it was open, it would just leak air, so you shut the valve, so that whole.
They didn't repair it.
Component didn't function.
So is it ever possible to file a forensic claim against a company that did such a bad job?
that wouldn't be my call.
I'm not sure I'm there yet, to be honest, because we honestly don't know if I don't, because I'm new, that contracting company may have been waving their arms around, begging for a larger budget to do maintenance properly and everything else that we weren't granting. I don't know, right? I mean, they've been here for 15 years, no one here, so.
You guys are doing an excellent job, I'm really impressed.
Thank you. Yeah, well, It's, I'll take credit for it, but he's the one. Thank you.
Mike, this is a new picture.
Well, I plugged it in. Oh, by the way, I've made a few minor changes in this presentation from what you see, not anything of any substance. But this, I just put this in there to show you, when that debris started moving downstream from the aeration basin, some of it got plugged into the secondary clarifiers and broke this, that may not look like a big deal, but that shut down the clarifier. So then this is like, we make a lot of emergency purchases. We like to purchase things ahead of time and know, you know.
So that's the picture of the fish. That's from Sunday. Because we had to start that clarifier, so we had to go into it and fish that out.
Yeah.
Because it was jamming the mechanism.
This right here
So that's what we were fishing
disabled
for.
it.
It was a big piece of metal like that.
It sheared off, it
Yeah,
broke
would
and sunk.
It would destroy the clarifier, so we had to find it through 2.5, 3 feet of.
And where did that metal come from? Was it part of the property or?
It's a rake mechanism that rakes.
It broke off. It
Yeah.
broke off related to the rags that Mike was talking about, the debris.
And when that
Taking a bite of
happened.
my food here.
Yeah, you probably. It's interesting, cause when something like that happens, there's fail safes on these things, there's like a limit torque.
Yeah.
Okay, when it gets to so many foot-pounds, it'll shut off. That should have happened here, rather than shearing off, critical pieces of components of the clarifier, it should have shut off, but it didn't. So I believe that limit torque was not doing what it's supposed to do.
We shipped in one of the limit torques, but yeah, that's a protection that protects your equipment from a very costly event. It's just another component you have to maintain.
So in summary, just like, I could have just put everything, you know, the belt press, the headworks, grit removal, screening, that wasn't functioning. Like I said, that causes problems downstream. It's supposed to take out those pieces that don't do well in the process. The secondary sludge pump, the waste activated sludge pump was inoperable when we got there. We fixed that immediately. The process water pumps, which I already discussed briefly, the chlorine storage and delivery system was kind of a nightmare, and there was some underground piping that has a potential for leaking chlorine, and it will migrate into Tickle Creek. Instrumentation and controls, this is huge. That's like the heart of any facility, is the instrumentation and controls. Over the years, you know, it became less labor intensive and more reliance on instrumentation and controls. Well, when those instrumentation and controls are broken and you can't rely on them, then that's a problem. And that's when I say a lack of control loop integrity, usually a control loop real basically and simply means if something does something over here, it will send a signal over here to make corrections or bring it in line. And that stuff is not
So on
working.
on the instrument, we've encountered quite a bit of obsolescence. Because a lot of this upgrade was done in '97. So there are components, and we ran into one just a week ago that it was obsolete when it went in. It was out, it was a controller on those recycle pumps. And it's pretty typical when you build a plant, we sometimes put in the less expensive stuff because it's a better price, but we've encountered a few of those, and so, you know, they're all fixable, but it's just another thing you have to address.
So far I've been talking primarily about the wastewater treatment plant. That doesn't mean that the water treatment plant doesn't also have issues. They're just not as immediate, and as pressing as the wastewater treatment plant. As I said earlier, 2 of the 3 filters are not functional, and the one that is functional is marginal.
Sure, but what my concern on that is that we are now at a point where we're later tonight having our first public hearing on a 90% increase in order to start paying for a new facility. And prior to the meeting, I'm hearing previous increases and raises over the last 10 years, and some are 0, some are less than 5%. Should we be because this has our attention, we don't have a choice. DEQ is making us put our attention on this, right?
Yes.
But should we be as leaders of this community, should we begin our process of turning our attention to our water treatment facility sooner rather than later?
Well, that's, as the owner, that decision is, you know, we're doing what we're doing now because even though we know there's deficiencies at the water treatment plant, we're not having any regulatory issues. The Oregon Health Authority doesn't say, hey, you're out of compliance. We're in compliance. It's just that things need to be addressed. The wastewater plant, we're spending a lot of effort there, just because there's violations there. And, you know, the staff that we have, you know, is adequate for normal routine operations, but when you're in the clarifiers fixing them all the time, it really detracts from, you know, I had a slide about process control. Well, that's the way we optimize processes. And we're not really at that point yet. We're hoping to get there.
Before we move on to the water treatment plant, 'cause I got a bunch of questions about the
Sure.
wastewater. I heard a lot of broken pieces, a lot of fixes, a lot of obsolete in the last 15, 20 minutes worth of your conversation. What's that done to our budget? Normally we have maybe that's a Mike question.
Yes, that's a good Mike question.
To me, it sounds like we've done a lot of fixes in the since March. What are we doing with our budget on that?
We're gonna spend a lot of money at the wastewater plant to deal with these issues. And the contract for operations includes a repairs budget, where the contractor has funds that they can draw from for repair, it's a fixed amount every year. But I think we've already exceeded that, and so now we're spending, you know, O&M funds out of the sewer fund budget for these things. We haven't, you know, we did, but we knew when we prepared the budget, we knew some of these issues were out there, so we did increase some of the repair and maintenance budgets. But we've been burning through that pretty rapidly. We do have a pretty healthy contingency in this budget as well.
So that money that we're supposed to be putting together to fix the I&I part and this obsolescence of the current plant, is that the money we're gonna drive from to pay for all
No,
this?
no, this would just be repair and maintenance funds, dollars in the sewer fund budget.
So are we spent through that money completely now?
No, we
So
probably,
got
you know,
some-
we're only 12.5% through the biennium, we probably spent 30% of that.
So are we done with our fixes and so on?
I wish we
Never
were.
done, Carl.
It
No.
seems like every time we open something up, 5, 10 more things jump out at us. You know, it's like the aeration basin. We didn't anticipate that.
Point out that, you know, we do have this, SRF funding from DEQ, which, you know, is a $6 million loan from DEQ.
Right.
And a lot of these condition assessment issues will be addressed with that funding. $2.5 million will be devoted to the treatment plant, and $3.5 million will be devoted to the repairs and the collection system.
So we do have money in this
We do.
loan to be able to take care of a lot of that. I'm assuming we're gonna find a lot more. Or have you gone through the whole thing already and we're now?
I'm hoping it's gonna stop, but we'll find more stuff. I think we've addressed some of the major issues. Some of the more critical equipment have been addressed in one way or another. The belt press, for instance, that's good. You know, we've got some belts there. We've got a spare belt, a critical spare. So, you know, as we address these things, the headworks, Tom has done a great job getting that headworks working the way it was supposed to. Now, whether it's adequate for future, you know, we're not master planners. We're not, you know.
You don't have a crystal ball or anything like that?
No, but part of it is, and this is one of the reasons that we wanted to get the condition assessment done as soon as possible, is to really give Mike the list of priorities and really focus it. And when you asked about the water plant, right, we did the condition assessment on both the wastewater and the water, and it actually gives you a combined score. And whatever is the top of the list is gonna give you your priority. And right now, water hasn't risen to the top of the list, right? Wastewater is still above that as far as the assets and those conditions that we have compared to industry standard. So one of the things that we wanted to do most was get to Mike a list of those priorities, so when those funds do come in, you can put it where you're gonna get the most bang for your buck, and where it's gonna fit with the master plan from Murray Smith as far as where we're sitting, what's gonna be replaced, what do you need to turn around and do in the meantime to get you to the best compliance you can have with the facilities that having them go further and further and push this higher and higher on their priority list. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how we get to the water plant is first getting
Oh, yeah.
some of the wastewater out of the way.
Oh, yeah, no, I get it. I'm just trying to figure out how much longer into the future is the other one coming, is all.
It's coming.
Your question is great. Those pictures, though, maybe another way to look at it is, the pictures that Mike's shown, they're not discretionary.
No.
These are right now,
These are necessary.
immediate. If you don't fix this, it's going over the bank.
Yeah.
You know, they're all that type of thing, where you can't press, and you can't run, and they're all in that category. The water is more, it's got some flexibility with the way the system is configured. So it hasn't been, you know, a disastrous, immediate type problem.
Okay, so I'm not done yet here. I happen to sit on a couple of watershed boards that are very focused on what's going on in Tickle Creek. We're coming up on the winter, and what our biggest problems are. What's your assessment of being able to maintain a non-fine winter?
I can't stand here and tell you that we're gonna, I don't know about fines, but as far as violations go, typically what the DEQ does is they'll compile a number of violations, notice of permit violations, notice of non-compliance. They'll compile them and do a fine based on an aggregate of those. They don't always do that, but sometimes they do, and there's different levels of severity when it comes to notices of non-compliance or permit violations. But right now, you know, I could not guarantee 12 or 9 months in the wintertime flows in Tickle Creek. You know, hopefully, you know, we're gonna strive to not have any. I hope we don't have any. But with all the mechanical issues that we've encountered, it's difficult.
You've been in touch with DEQ a bunch.
A bunch.
Several months.
Yeah,
So
they know us very well.
I'm assuming, I wish I had some response from DEQ, and I only talked once in a while. I haven't seen any kind of, are they pretty confident that you guys are on the right track? Are they thinking you guys really need to jump on several things? And are we able to support you?
I believe they are. What's your thoughts on that, Mike? You know, we did submit the plan. They were good with the plan. They're good with the progress we're making on it, but I'm not sure they're good. You know, I don't know what their thoughts are right now. But we spend a lot of time with them. They're
Yeah, I
What's
think,
the
you know, I mean,
choice?
they've funded these condition assessment improvements and funded some of the, collection system work. So, it's just that we can't just, you know, some things can only be, taken out of service and replaced or repaired in the summer, and some things can only be taken out of service and replaced or repaired in the winter. So it's nothing that we can do in a year. We've submitted a schedule to them on how we're gonna spend this money and what we're gonna spend it on. And I think we assume that the, condition assessment, improvements would be, complete by November of 2021.
And so DEQ is interested not just in the operations of the plant too, but it's the entire program and the entire system. I mean, you know, they're doing the best they can with what they have and with the budget that we have, but, you know, the big loan that we're, you know, gonna receive and, you know, making the improvements to the system to tighten it up so that capacity issues can be taken care of, and, you know, help them with the operations of the plant. It's gonna take a lot more dollars and a lot more time to get done. So they understand, DEQ is, you know, they recognize that it's more than just what's happening in terms of operations. It's the entire, you know, plant itself and the entire wastewater system.
The DEQ saying, here's this list of things we think you need to watch over.
Mhm.
They're probably not as understanding of the plant itself as you guys are. They probably don't know, much like me, I don't know.
Well, they get the
Diffuser from
Mhm.
wand or whatever, I don't know the differences, but they're probably pretty
Well, they get copied on the
specific about what
plans
they
and
want
understand
to
the
see this winter.
issues.
Well, they
Yeah.
approved the action plan, correct?
Yeah.
So
And they're pretty knowledgeable. They've been out to the site, they have a very good understanding of,
Okay.
Yeah, they come out when they were interested when we took the aeration basin out of service and de-watered it. They wanted to see, I anticipated that we would see debris in there and grit and other things because of the way that the headworks was performing prior to us doing that. And we fixed the headworks first, but still, there was stuff in there.
What is the headworks?
The headworks is the head of the plant,
The beginning
by
of the plant.
definition. So it takes out grits, rocks, rags, that stuff you don't want in your process because it jams up pumps and valves and blinds off diffusers and those types of things.
Plugs, clarifiers.
Yeah. So,
Is that corkscrew that takes the trash out before it goes through the
yes,
rest of the
yeah,
plant?
it corkscrews it into a
Dumpster.
bin, and then that goes out as a solid waste to the landfill.
I don't tend to go to questions to the audience, but someone asked for one, so I'm gonna do that. All right, go ahead, yes.
Where are we in regard to running into a moratorium on building and development because
Yeah.
of all these things? Are we getting in danger there?
I think that'll be something that, well, I mean, it's a question posed, we're not there yet. That has not been anything that has been pushed forward yet, from like a DEQ or anybody else.
Yeah, and the way that works is DEQ can impose a moratorium. They give you like 180 days to come up with a plan on how you'll address the issues, and then they have to lift the moratorium. So they can't put an indefinite moratorium on connections to the system as long as we have a plan or making progress on it.
It's just a whole large issue that would be explored at that time, but then we get into LUBA cases and everything else, but we can't.
The whole point here is that DEQ and Viola and Sadie Sandy have all been in the same room. And they're all looking at the same problem, and we're going forward on a fix. And as long as those fixes work, that's why I've been quizzing you.
Yeah.
That should be an appropriate reason for us to go forward with all our developments, all of our buildings, continuing to do the things that we have to do as a city to take care of ingrowth, so that's why, it's really important for me to see this move forward. A bit of a shock, I gotta say, I didn't realize we were in such bad shape underneath all that liquor.
So moving on here in the discussion, without reading every word of this, so far in the last 6 months, most of our efforts have been reactive. Things are broken, blowing up in our face, and we're fixing it, you know, and not just the guy with a finger in the dike, you know, a temporary fix, but we're trying to fix these things the way they're supposed to be as they happen. The second bullet here, this is where we want to be. We want to be in a proactive mode, not reactive. We want to be planning out our maintenance. We want to be zeroing in on our process and optimizing the process. But there's no way we can do that if the mechanical equipment is busted. There's just no way we can. I don't know how the previous people did it at all. I just don't.
Sound like you didn't.
Probably not. I don't know. Anyway, I know we've asked questions throughout this, so I'm more happy to answer any questions.
So I have a question, maybe it's for Mike or Jordan, but I kinda went through the same process where I work in taking over our data center and bringing on this same exploratory thing,
Yep.
and then bringing in, and up front there was a bigger cost because a lot of things were broken,
Sure.
getting into that, but then the following years, it was more maintenance and looking forward and
That-
keeping,
that- yeah,
keeping
that's
your
where we wanna
buildings,
go.
healthy, right, and being
Absolutely.
proactive, and you mentioned this reactive and proactive thing,
Yeah.
so I appreciate that, and I do see like the light out of this if we go forward, but to do so, what are we doing to audit you guys, audit the system, which have been auditing that, is there third parties come in and audit to make sure that some of these things don't get as bad as they are? I'm sure you guys are doing a great job, it's not
No.
saying you guys aren't, but just like we have audits for our finance and audits for our other things.
Looks like we're coming off the heels of something we probably would have liked to have seen.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
being able to come forward and go, you know, every 5 years, we're having this audit, or every 2 years, or every year, whatever it may be.
Some O&M contracts call that out, that there's a third-party audit with contract operators like us, like Veolia. Some do, some don't, you know, it just depends on how the contract is set up. We'd be more than happy, we try to be totally transparent. We'd be more than happy to have somebody come out and audit our operations.
Right.
More importantly, one of the things we wanna make sure that Jordan and Mike are getting is regular updates on where we are as far as maintenance. At least a quarterly report showing these are the things that have been done, these are the things that are budgeting works, so that we make sure you're well aware in advance of what's coming up for major capital improvements, where it should go, and how you can start budgeting for those. So those are part of the things that you don't currently have that we're recommending we put in place to make sure that when you come to budgeting periods, when you start planning things, when you start working with other engineering firms, you know, obviously we're not expecting it, we're supposed to go anywhere, but that you can actually focus that and work with them to say, okay, if we're making capital improvements, how do these capital items fit in, so that we're not double dipping, you're not improving something that's gonna be replaced in 6 months to a year, that you're not focusing on the wrong items, so that, you know, all of that goes together to make sure that you're getting the best efficiency. But as Mike said, we're always happy to turn around and work with somebody else to come in and audit those programs and make sure that you're getting what you think you're paying for. Everything that's in that contract should be verifiable.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I think we see what happens when we rely on the representations of contractor and the glossy brochure that shows us all these, innovations and improvements that they've undertaken. And, you know, we assume everything's okay, so I don't think we wanna, I mean, we had confidence in the prior operator until very recently, I think. And whether that was justified or not, I don't know, but I think it would be good to have some third-party scrutiny of these things. We're not just relying on, we rely on, we hire the contractor to provide these services and keep us in the loop on what's going on, but we don't really have any means to verify that would probably.
I think with being on council, as long as some of us have, we've seen the contract come up and the report coming back going, hey, we're adding these expenses, but we're not gonna charge you anymore for it. So, hey, look how great this is, where in reality, they should have just broke the news and saying, hey, we need more money because we've gotta replace some things to keep the building, keep the infrastructure in place, and that hadn't happened over time. I don't wanna speculate why all the reasons we can do that, but, rather have seen that to know what the real cost is to make sure our asset, one of our biggest assets in the city, is staying maintained properly.
I think, just to add on what you were asking, I think one that for city would be really good to look at is, you should be spending a certain amount, you have a certain amount of investment in an asset. You should be spending a certain amount of maintenance, and there's some metrics out there that will tell you. And if you go for many years and you're not spending the money, and you think, wow, this is great, costs are low, that may not be a good thing. I think this is a case in point right here.
Why strategic budgeting takes place.
This took a lot of years to get in this condition.
That's my point.
We would welcome a third party look at our operations, and if there's something that they see that we're doing, or not doing that we should be doing, we'd be the first ones to wanna know about that, so.
Yeah, I think that would be, I think the third party thing is a great suggestion too, but, I think in terms of looking at the plan going out with the capital plan, I think is a great thing that Veolia is doing, and the challenge will be, not getting too distracted. I mean, we're obviously gonna be distracted, rightfully so, on a huge facilities plan with major capital improvements, but we have a lot of assets that need to be maintained, and we need, make sure that CIP, whether, it's maybe a $50,000 item here and a $100,000 item there, is not forgotten. That's also built into the rates, that we can, 5, 10, 15 years have the dollars on hand to make those necessary improvements to our plant, because this is where we get in trouble in a lot of capital in the public sector, is we build it and then we're done, it's good, and then 20 years later we're like, we forgot to replace that filter, we forgot to fix that. So I think that's gonna be great that they're gonna provide that sort of prioritization of the small capital that we need at the plant. We're obviously gonna put some big dollars into it over the next couple of years, but these folks are the ones on the ground doing the work every day and know best in terms of what's happening and what pipes need fixed and what filters need replaced, and that's important to be able to build that into our budget on an ongoing basis.
And I'd like to see what about the clean water too. That's another major asset we have.
And the water,
What it is until
we're gonna have a water master plan that's gonna kick off here pretty shortly, and that's sort of the next piece, right? We've been focused so much on wastewater, because of all these violations and all the things that we've been talking about for months. But water is gonna be another focus for us, and with the water master plan, we're gonna have, an updated capital plan with, how much we're gonna need to invest in our treatment plant reservoirs and things like that, so, that could influence rates.
Well, and on that, I think a lot of, some of the newer on council, myself included, obviously, would like to, some background on water rights and everything. So just the history of water in our community to a certain extent, why we've made certain decisions strategically that we have to pursue certain things versus not.
I have a question. We're about to spend $2 million, Mike, on the new fixes on the current plant.
2.5.
$2.5 million. Are these folks being involved in improvement, and are you guys familiar with that? So I got the nod from Jordan over here.
With the
so-
master plan?
No, with the corrections that we're talking about doing, that DEQ says we have to increase things like, I understand there's a primary intake tank that has not ever been put in there, that.
Primary clarifier.
Clarifier.
Yeah, I
Okay.
wish we had one.
No, I understood that was on.
Great.
Sure.
Is that in the plan? Is that not in the plan?
Well, and
That's what
you
I'm
know
told,
that.
that was one of the big reasons why we're having so many troubles.
I would say it's
Go
one of the
specific,
reasons,
go-
but we're not doing an evaluation of the whole thing. We're looking at the pieces that that we have to operate, and capacity assessments and that type of stuff, that's more in the court of the people that are doing the master plan, as far as, is it adequate, is it big enough, is it, I have my personal opinions about primary clarifiers that I really like them.
I understand we don't have one, and we need one, so maybe this may not be the time, because it's only about 13 minutes before we gotta go to the next step, but maybe it would be good conversation between you and I to talk about it. Comfort me that this is $2.5 million you're putting into the fixes.
Are you gonna get the bang for your buck?
Is it gonna keep me,
Yeah.
at least until we get the new plant up and running, some way to be able to make sure we don't get into our trouble we had last year?
The short answer is no, there's no primary clarifier in this $2.5 million phase, Carl.
That's what I understand.
That's in it's phase 3.
How much is, whatever clarifier?
Primary.
Primary.
So primary would probably cost you about
So we won't get done in
There's
this
other things
first-
you've gotta do
Before we get
that would be that would be down the road to me.
But I
And you
think
need to
that-
address this also.
The answer to the question is yes, we have the only review both Murray Smith's condition assessment, they provided their own, and we had Kermit Cloud prepare one. So again, and they kind of all land on the same major items. So we did ask for their input, as well as our own consulting engineers on the work that Murray Smith did.
I have a question on your communication. You said you upgraded the communication with inside the plant there. I know in the past, you guys, or your previous people before you, monitored the communication to some of the pump stations out there in the field, and some of them were dysfunctional or ignored in that. Has that been corrected, and are the communication between pump stations around our city being monitored correctly now?
I believe, as far as the lift stations go, now, when we first came on site, the lift station alarms were being routed through the wastewater plant.
Right.
But the communications were, I wouldn't say non-existent, but all the phone lines were owned by the predecessors, or they were paying those phone lines. And so we wanted them transferred over to us, and that was a fiasco. That was a problem. So anyway, we eventually got there, but it took a while.
But are those lift stations being monitored properly now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a standalone system and a back, at the Public Works building, where everything is reported to there. And some of it's over lease line, some of it's on the city's network. And then the fail-safe is it also provides an alarm down at the wastewater plant. That calls that out. Yeah, so.
And that's where it failed a couple times here a year ago or so.
I think previously it was a communication where the contract operator would contact the public works, but now it goes there directly, and then
Okay.
you have a backup, so
Just wanted to make sure it was.
Yeah,
resolved.
I would say that's much better than it was.
Yeah, as a backup, we would call the city if we got an alarm, but they should get the alarm before that, so that we're not relying on somebody listening and picking up a phone, that it's automatic. That way you kind of streamline
And that was a
the
problem, when there
communication.
was turnover, you know, there wouldn't be, oh, by the way, when this happens, you're supposed to do this, there wasn't that continuity with the prior operator, and so that's where some of those issues arose.
Okay, but they've been addressed, is what I hear.
All right, we getting there?
No, not quite.
All right, go.
I came prepared.
Yeah.
This last week, I talked to a bunch of people, some on social media, some on just going through the city, about the drinking water. So I'm moving over to the good water, right? This is the stuff that doesn't stink. And they tell me it stinks.
Well, I was gonna say, it's eye of the beholder there.
2/3 of the people I talked to, I try to keep track of it, and I lost count after a while. But around 2/3 of the people I talked to thinks that it's almost not drinkable because of the chlorine and the smell and the taste. And so I know we're in the right mode in terms of clean, safe to drink, correct that way. But it sounds like we have at least some pretty strong perception from people I talk to that think that the water, primarily from the Portland water part, I think our.
you where
No, it gets brought
It's
up.
hard.
It gets brought up unsolicited.
Is it all over?
My neighborhood.
Yeah. It's hard to tell.
So we had our pH tested a little over a year ago, and it's 6.1, which is below the 6.1.
6.1's too low.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Portland has they kind of flunked the lead and copper rule, so they have to do some pH adjustment at the headworks, and I think at Luston Hill as well. But that water, as it comes into Sandy, that they put a lot of chlorine in the headworks.
Mhm.
That's to last all the way down into town. And Sandy kind of intercepts that, so there's some pretty
It's
high
messing
level
up my
chlorine.
fixtures at the house, too.
What's that?
It's messing up my fixtures at the house.
I guess the statement I would try to emphasize, and then I'm gonna leave it go at the moment, is that there's a lot of folks who don't like the water. Really love the water here about 5-6 years ago before we hooked up to the Portland water system. I've been in the spring works up the mountain, and it's just spectacular clear. It's beautiful water drinking, and then when we started getting some of the Portland water stuff, it has really made a big difference in the quality, how people perceive or actually know what the water is. There's a couple statements I won't even read here, I was gonna read it, but there's some real struggles with that. So we aren't there with our water system at this point, especially with the Portland water from the Bull Run. So I think we need to work on that as well.
Yeah, and Portland's under, they have to build a water treatment plant, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
by 2026.
27, yeah.
And hopefully Sandy will, the location of that plant might be important.
Well, we've heard murmur.
It-
That's part of the water master plan update that we're doing, is deciding whether we're going to purchase treated water from Portland, or purchase raw water from Portland and treat it ourselves. So, I mean, that will be evaluated as part of the water master plan update.
At one time, we were having trouble between the way Portland treats their water and the way we treat our water. And that interaction wasn't very pleasant. I don't know all the terms and
Well,
everything. I'm not-
without getting way off in the weeds here, yes, that's been solved by the way we blend our water with Portland.
So that one is now solved, being able to be complemented, okay.
But yeah, that issue with the chlorine in the Portland water has been there since we've connected to the system.
But we've not solved the problem. I personally have a filter on my system that takes as much as the chlorine out as I can. But I know people aren't, they're telling me that they're not even drinking city water. They're using bottled water. We're not there yet. Okay.
All right, ready to go into meeting? All right, we're gonna recess for about 5 minutes. pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome everybody. Tyler, will you please call the roll? Good timing, huh?
Here.
Counselor Smallwood.
Here.
Counselor Hamlin.
Present.
Counselor Lee.
Here.
Counselor Exner.
Here.
Counselor Schultz.
Here.
And Mayor Polio.
Here.
Thank you.
Per tradition, we start off kind of doing a quick rundown of our agenda so everybody understands the way things will work this evening. So first we'll go to our any changes to the agenda, then we'll move on to public comment. So the public comment portion will be for any items that a member of the public would like to get up and speak on for an item that's in front of council. If you are here tonight and are wanting to testify at our public hearing on our wastewater facilities plan, or proposed wastewater and water rate increases, that will be the moment for those two. So anything not those two items, that will be for public comment earlier in the evening. After public comment, we'll have a presentation on the 2020 census, getting the correct count here in Sandy. We'll move on to the consent agenda, and then our new business items, our public hearing on the wastewater facilities plan, as well as the proposed wastewater rate increases. After that, we'll have our city manager's report, and then we'll go into committee and council reports, and then we'll adjourn. So with that, I will ask if there's any changes to the agenda. Seeing none, I'll move on to public comment. This is the moment for public testimony. You'll have 5 minutes to address the council. When you get to the podium, please state your name and address for the record. This would be your moment. Welcome.
My name is John Taylor. I'm one of the vice presidents of the Sandy Lions Club. We've been working on a project for probably over a year now. And it's to put a welcome to Sandy sign on the west side. Be kind of a real nice sign, about 8 by 20. Of course, it'll be lighted, and the owner of the land there wants to put in a water feature with it too, so it should be a pretty nice looking sign, and matter of the exact location has not been determined yet. There's possibilities under the power line, at the edge of the power line, on the right of way. The new building that just went up, it could go with that building, so we're not at that point yet. What we're looking for is what your feedback is about that type of a sign, and if you seem to be in favor of it, we would proceed with the planning process. Mm-hmm. We have copies of the sign ordinance, so we feel we can accommodate all the requirements that you have in there and go through the process of getting it approved. So again, tonight, I'm going to get a feel of what you think of a nice sign there. And one thing I heard is something about the was it Arts Commission or something like that. They want to have some in there to give it a nice attractive sign. We're thinking of putting a reader board in it too, and in your sign ordinance there's some requirements for reader boards, so that's a possibility. The other is, as you travel across our country, you go through communities where they have a sign, and then they got some little signs from the various organizations, whether it's Lions, any of those. But as you get closer into urbanized areas, and Sandy is kind of on the borderline, whether we could go that way or whether we need to be looking at the reader board. So, just sign in here.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any questions from council? Carl? Yeah.
Sorry.
Councilor Exner.
I happen to know about the Art Commission, very large amount. They were also talking about doing something to work on that, what used to be the waterfall sign as you come into the west side of the split of the highways. And that's been disrepaired for several, probably years now. But they would be very interested in it. By the way, Wednesday night at 6 o'clock, the Art Commission is meeting right here.
Wednesday
This
night,
week.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock
Okay.
this week, here in this place right here.
Very good.
And you can certainly bring that up, and they would like to be involved. I don't think they would be in charge of that, but they would like to be at least aware and provide advice for it. So, excellent idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Jordan, what department would normally manage wayfinding and signs to the city?
Probably Public Works. I understand we had a sign there at some point in time.
Plan.
Oh, well, in terms of the sign.
He's not here, so.
Oh, I see that.
It just shifted a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
He's not here tonight.
Oh, I don't see him yet.
But, you know, it sounds like they've done some research on the sign ordinance, and what's been required. I think the old sign is actually still around somewhere. But with the new city branding and with the fact that we do have an arts commission now, I mean, I love the ideas of like a fountain and things like that. And we have previewed with council some ideas for the new downtown signage, and talked about, you know, possibly doing some repairs, to the existing fountain. But, you know, this is kind of the bigger theme too, in terms of beautifying the city and beautification and talking about medians on the highway and trying to pressure road out for that. But I think a great start is working with the community on an entryway sign into the community. So I love the idea of involving the Arts Commission. That gets a little more public involvement, and that's also a good way to interface with staff and determining the right department to help work on this too.
Is there any potential hurdles that you see as far as whether it's I know like we don't have a sign code for a community garden, for example, right? Because that goes more into parks. So is there any hurdles you see them on commercial signs? Anything that they should know going in that we should start sidestepping?
I'm sure there's a provision for monument signs. I mean, we have them for the downtown, for Sandy. The reader board is a little trickier. I think there's some rules around that.
Sure.
How often they can change. And the other question too, there's more like regulatory questions, right? In terms of location, but who owns the property? Is it right of way? Is it ODOT? Is there city property? Is it private ownership? You know, like Mr. Benson has property out there. There's Bella Farm and the BPA. So all the location questions and where it might go, where the best place would be in terms of, you know, future development and everything happening on those parcels too. So all worth looking into.
You bet, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Consensus would be cool?
Yeah.
Done right?
Yeah. Bring back some more information.
All right, great. Well, thank you for coming and for proactively doing that. I think we'd all be very excited to see that happen. And Arts Commission was talked about. They would, I think they'd be excited to provide assistance. That's always, I think, the most helpful, is just when people want to step up and help. Those folks definitely are that way. And let us keep us up to date in any ways that council can kind of help or provide guidance or encouragement. Thank you for doing it.
Retired city regional planner, city manager.
Yeah.
Planning director, went to those for a long time, so I got some experience.
All right.
So, okay, I
Oh,
can
good.
work with
Yeah.
the city on it.
That's great.
That's probably why they chose me.
Yeah.
Stuck to it, huh?
Well, thank you. Really appreciate it. Is there any other public comment for this evening? Okay. Seeing none, I will move on to our presentation on the 2020 census. This is now the third time that I've seen your presentation. I liked it so much I asked you back so I could see it a third time. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Hello, my name is Sarah Bashore. I'm a resident of Clackamas County, but I also work for the U.S. Census Bureau. My role is to reach out to everyone and talk with them about the changes that will be occurring with the 2020 census. And I'll have to give you the quiz that I made up recently.
Oh, no.
Let's go ahead and get started. Why do we do the census? It's actually written into the Constitution that we must do the decennial census every 10 years. The primary reason why we have to do the census has to do with reapportionment, the 435 seats that belong to the House of Representatives. It also has to do with electoral colleges and the representation there. At a local level, it has to do with redistricting. All the political boundaries will change once the new census comes out. The big killer reason why we do the census, though, has to do with the $13.5 billion that we get from the federal government. I gave you each a flyer that talks about where the money goes to. We're looking at $6.6 billion that goes towards Medicaid. That's the Oregon Health Plan. We're also looking at SNAP, WIC, and other really important programs that make Oregon a good place to live. It's not just about the social services, though. It's also about hospitals, fire stations, anything that has a large ticket price to it. The federal government is kicking in their fair share to make sure that we get what we need in the way of facilities. The goal of the census is to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. What does that mean to most of us? It's where do you live most of the time? If you live in Sandy most of the time, then that's where you're going to self-report from. But if you have a beach house down in, let's say, Lincoln City, if you were to live down there most of the time, but you just had a house here, then you would report from there. So there's actually 5 pages worth of residency rules. We're not going to go into all 5 pages because it can be a little complicated, but let's use a couple of other examples. One would be if you had a college student, a daughter, for example, that was going to school, let's say at Pacific University in Washington County, and she lived in a dorm, you would actually not count her because she'll be counted at Pacific University because that's where she lives most of the time. If you had a foreign exchange student, for example, from Paris that was over here living in your home, you would be able to count that person because they're living here most of the time. The Constitution is clear. We count all residents that live in the United States. It doesn't matter what their citizenship is. I do want to give you a bit of advice, though, a little bit of a warning as public officials. If you get arrested on April 1st in Multnomah County, you will be counted in Multnomah County for the next 10 years. So if you feel the need to get arrested, make sure it happens in Clackamas County.
That's the last thing I want.
I'm just saying.
There's a few out up here, I can tell.
The comedian actor.
So our challenge is to count approximately 330 million people living throughout the United States. That's 140 million housing units. Why do we care about the housing units? Because that's where we're going to mail the information. We do not mail to P.O. boxes. How many P.O. boxes do you think are in the city of Sandy? Is that going to be an issue here?
Well, I have one.
Okay. We need to work out strategies for P.O. boxes because we view a P.O. box as being like an email address. If you move, you take it with you. So there are strategies that we will use for P.O. boxes, but it is something that we'll need to discuss as we get closer to April 1st, which is Census Day. In Oregon, we're looking at counting approximately 4.2, perhaps 4.3 million people that live in 1.8 million housing units. So in Sandy, it actually looks pretty good because we've only got to count, according to 2017 information, approximately 10,581 people living in almost 4,100 housing units. So it shouldn't be too difficult, we hope. The ability to self-respond starts March 12th. You'll be able to go over the internet or use toll-free numbers, or you can self-report using the short form. If you don't choose to do any of those, you must expect that an enumerator will come knocking on your door. The process. As I said, it begins on March 12th and it'll end on July 24th. We will send out a series of 5 invitations. It almost seems as though you're going to a party, but you're not. They're just called invitations. The first 3 invitations are more like postcards that just ask that you complete the information over the internet or over the phone. The 4th time we send you a mailer, it's actually going to be a letter, and the short form will be included in that letter. The reason why we wait on the short form is because it's a lot more expensive to have to send things out and to have to do the documentation for the count using the short form. So we're really hoping most people will use the internet or the phone. After the 4th time that we've sent out the letter, the last letter that we send out is basically a final notice. It's notifying the resident that if they don't do something fairly quickly, we're going to have someone come knocking at their door. Oops, I want to back up. I kind of missed something. Potentially there could be up to 3 enumerator visits. That's what we call a census taker. Basically what happens is the 3rd time that we go to your house, if no one is there, we're going to knock on a neighbor's door and we're going to ask if someone lives there. If they say yes, but they're on an extended vacation, for example, we'll try to get the last name and we'll contact Social Security, the IRS, or other federal agencies, and we'll ask information about that address, just to make sure that we can get information on that address so we can get a good count. At this point in time, like to use my example of my cousin Stan, who lives down in Curry County. He lives next to a river illegally. Family has told him that that's not appropriate and that he shouldn't live there, but nonetheless, he's been there for 3 years now. So when an enumerator goes there and sees the trailer, they'll knock on the door, they'll find out that 2 people live in that trailer, and we will enumerate using latitude and longitude, because we're going to count everybody. Lastly, when you get the information, we do not use regular street addresses, because things change. What could be a vacant field with maybe 1 house on it could now be an apartment building that has several hundred apartments. Instead, we use a user ID for all parcels of land. When someone wants to enumerate, if they do not have the user ID, we will still take the information. For example, if they call or if they use the internet, just leave that blank and we'll match up the user ID information later.
Odd and personal question is, so if somebody knocked on my brother's door in Boring over the weekend and said, I'm with the U.S. Census Bureau, they'd be lying,
No,
correct?
they
Why?
weren't lying, no.
Because I thought the enumerators don't go out until...
That's correct. What we have out now are listers.
Listers? What's a lister?
A lister is, right now, the way the process works is that we have to verify all the addresses in the United States.
Yeah.
So using Google Maps and other GIS systems, we were able to identify and to validate about 65% of the addresses in the United States.
Huh.
That still leaves us about 35% where we have to knock on the door. So right now we're doing what's called the AdCan program, address canvassing. And we're just wanting to verify the addresses because we're finding more and more examples of someone may convert their garage, for example, into an apartment. We're only going to be sending out 1 census form, but if you rent out that garage, we need to make sure that we capture that address as well. So the AdCan campaign is actively going on right now, and it'll continue through mid-October.
Well, let him know. He'll be less nervous.
Yes, yes,
Thank
and
you.
he should have a federal ID and then a notebook, a briefcase that also says U.S. Census on it. And then after that's over, there's another program that will be going on, which is called group enumeration. So you can expect to see census people periodically, even before March 12th. But good question. What do we ask? Name, address, phone number, gender, age, birth date, whether someone lives somewhere else, and the relationship. Are the questions mandatory? No. You don't have to answer all the questions. For example, if you don't want to put down a phone number, you don't have to. But if you say that you're a family of 5 and you only give your name, we are not going to be able to accept that. We need the names and the birth dates of everyone who lives in the house and the relationship, because we are going to internally do some auditing to check and make sure that we're getting an accurate count and that we're not getting redundant information. So there are a basic 10 questions that are asked. The citizenship question is no longer on the census. But if these questions are not answered, it just depends upon the individual question as to whether or not we'll do follow-up. Ethnicity, for example, question 8. If you leave that blank, we are not going to be following up to find out the ethnicity of the family. The languages, whether you go over the internet or over the phone, there are 13 languages available for the self-reporting. If, for example, you do not do one of the phone, the internet, or the self-reporting, and we have to send an enumerator out, we also have language cards in additional 59 languages. So for example, if someone speaks Mandarin Chinese, we'll be able to give them 59 cards. They'll be able to tell us which language they want to report in, and we'll get somebody to them that speaks Mandarin Chinese. Anything that we do in paper form, though, will only be in Spanish and English. Everything we do is private and confidential. I'm going to tell you a sad story that happened during World War II. The Department of Defense came to the Census Bureau and asked for information on Japanese Americans. The Census Bureau gave the information. It directly led to the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, even in Oregon. After that whole thing ended, after World War II was over, Congress approximately 2 years later tightened Title 13 and made it illegal for us to give out any personally identifiable information. But how do we know the information and the law that took place in 1947, whether or not it's even relevant to today? So let's move forward to when 9/11 happened in New York. Law enforcement officials again came back to the census and asked for information on Arab Americans that were living in the New York area. We refused to give the information, citing Title 13. It went to court and the Census Bureau won. We did not have to give out any personally identifiable information. The information that we did give out, you're going to see some of it in a few minutes. It's the demographics based upon census blocks. So there is information that's available over the census website, but it is not personally identifiable, which is name, address, phone number, date of birth, so on and so forth. I do want to point out two important things. When the census starts its reporting, we do not ask for social security numbers nor credit card information. So if someone gets anything about that, it is not us. And you see that there are a lot of scams in that area. Another thing that we're doing, particularly in Oregon, is we're going to be working with the libraries, all local libraries throughout Oregon. We've already gotten the state's approval, plus we received Clackamas County's approval. We will ask to have census resource centers in every library where people will be able to assist your residents with filling out the forms, and also they'll feel more comfortable that if they do go over the website, that it is a valid website. So let's talk about the hard to count populations. There's approximately 7 of them, and we'll go through there looking at the demographics. Approximately 14% of your population in Sandy is over the age of 62. We view that as a hard to count population. What does hard to count mean? Basically that it takes a little more effort to get to them. It doesn't mean they don't want to be counted. It just means that we have to spend a little bit more effort. For example, most people who are hard to count, they don't respond to our 5 invitations. We normally have to go out and send an enumerator out. We're just trying to avoid that if we can, because that also skyrockets our costs. Children under the age of 5, this is another large demographic for you. In the state of Oregon, it's about 4.5%, so you're almost double in the amount of small children that you have, which basically means you're probably a very family-centered city, which is a good thing. Unfortunately, children under 5, through no fault of their own, tend not to get counted. There's a couple of reasons. Split custody. Mom and dad divorce, and both think the other one is going to be doing the self-reporting. Secondly, children living in age-restricted housing. Many grandparents today are raising their grandchildren. The grandparents are either embarrassed or afraid to notify us that they have the grandchildren there. We need to make sure that the grandparents understand that it is wholly appropriate for them to give us that information. We're not going to tell the government in case it's Section 8 housing, and we're not going to tell the landlord in case there's some sort of a rule as to how many people can live in the home. We just want to make sure that we get an accurate count from each house. And then lastly, it's a byproduct of parents not responding. If you have a mom who has 3 children and she doesn't respond, then the byproduct is we've missed 4 people. I thought it kind of fit.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So renters, this is a really high demographic for you guys, and this is really great news because renters tend not to self-report, but almost 71% of Sandy has home ownership, which is one of the highest in the state. So you're not going to really need to worry about them. The homeless count is really more of a Clackamas County issue, and we'll be working with Clackamas County to make sure that we get a complete and accurate count. I will be contacting Jordan at some point in time as we get closer to the homeless count, which will be the last of March, to make sure that if you do have homeless people here, that we identify where they normally tend to be.
Is this saying 22 homeless in
That was
Sandy or Clackamas County?
In Clackamas County, but that was from 2010.
Yeah, that number's gonna be different.
Yeah, that number's gonna be way different. I just wanted to give you a little statistic that in 2010 it showed there were only 22 and how it's grown.
It seems low for even 22.
That doesn't sound right either.
Today.
Yeah, well, and also keep in mind point in time. With point in time, you have to really appreciate what they do. They have a form they have to fill out, but it's a very complicated form. Many people who are experiencing homelessness do not want to complete the form. It asks a lot of questions as to why you're homeless, when was your last job, how you identify sexually, but it could be viewed by many as being intrusive in nature. And so we expect that the counts that they have given to us are exceptionally low. We still need those counts because HUD will reimburse based upon the completed forms that they get. With us, just so that you know, there's only 3 questions that we're going to ask people experiencing homelessness. We want to know their name, their birth date, and how they identify with their ethnicity. That's all we're looking for. So I think we'll get probably a more accurate count.
And that's done one day out of the year, right?
It usually is done one day out of the year, but there's been a lot of discussion because there's so many homeless that we might have to do it over a 3-day period.
Wow.
In the past, we only did a strict head count only in one night. If we do it over 3 nights, that's why we're going to need to know the name and birth date as well, to make sure that we don't get an overcount.
Is that 3 nights in Sandy or 3 nights in Clackamas County?
That's 3 nights in all of the United States. I don't know how many there will be actually in Sandy. If it'll just be here for 1 night, I would assume so, yeah. But nationwide, it'll be over a 3-night period.
How many people counting? I mean.
We're gonna have, just in Oregon, over 3,000 people counting. Yeah, a lot of people. Whoops, I missed the migrant workers, which really isn't such a big issue with you guys anyway. We counted, according to OSU, there were approximately 28,000 living in Oregon and 2,000 living in Clackamas County, but that does not include family members. If you were to include family members, the amount is closer to 58,000. The problem we have counting migrant workers is we never know where they're going to be. It's where is the fruit either being grown or being picked, or those circumstances. We are working with a lot of migrant groups to help us identify where the migrant workers will be so that we can get them counted. The biggest issue that we're going to be facing in the census has to do with foreign-born residents. In the city of Sandy, using 2017 information, we had 255 that were not U.S. citizens. You have a total of 652 naturalized citizens here. All of these people need to be counted. The not a U.S. citizen will be the hardest to count. It is important that we count them, though, because it equates to approximately $3,200 a person that we could lose if we do not get an accurate count. The internet, this is the first time that we'll be using the internet and phone options for self-reporting. There's a variety of issues that we need to be aware of, familiarity with the system, which is why we're asking people to go to their local library and to use them as a resource center. Accessibility would also be covered by the library. The system security, just to kind of give you a quick overview, the way that our database works is people will go in over the internet or they'll call, we put the information in, but periodically we will actually remove the information from the internet and put it into our database. Our database is kept offline. But the biggest issue really has to do with trust of the information. A lot of people are very concerned about doing the census because they're afraid the information may go elsewhere and that it might be turned over to other law enforcement agencies. Again, here's the hard to count population. In reality, your children under 5 and your foreign-born internet issues are going to be the biggest, but we also have to take into account your P.O. boxes. I'm an Oregon Partnership Specialist. My job is to educate, encourage, and to engage. I'm your liaison with the U.S. Census. Whenever you have questions, please just contact Jordan, and he's got my email address, or he can call me as you have questions. Your constituents will have questions as we get closer to March 12th when the census begins. You could form a complete count committee. I think that you're one of the areas, though, that really doesn't need one. You're not like Hillsborough or Beaverton that have a lot of serious issues in the counting. Your demographics, all in all, look pretty darn good. Recruiting is a big issue with us, however. We have 3 offices in Portland right now. The Portland office opened about a month ago, and it is extremely short of staff. If you know of anyone who is interested in working for the census, all they need to do is go to census.gov and apply for a job there. They're part-time jobs. They pay higher than minimum wage. You have to be over 18, a U.S. citizen, and probably have a car in order to get around. It's a pretty good part-time job, and it is considered seasonal work. There is no one better to enumerate your city than to have a local resident be a part of it. So the more local residents that we can get to help us with the enumeration, the better count we're going to get. You guys know more than someone from Portland where the hard to count are located. And with that, I'd love questions. Thank you.
Guess I'll start. You mentioned we're set up pretty good, probably don't need to do a committee. That said, I'm kind of excited about the census count because of our size, because we're big enough where these issues are starting to really matter to us as far as federal dollar allocation. But small enough, we can really proactively get a good count, right? So what would your suggestions be? We have our librarian here and our director of kind of senior community services, our police chiefs here. So all 3 of those department heads are obviously interacting with the community a lot. What are some things as a city organization our size that we could be doing to proactively go out and get the count?
One of the things that the city of Milwaukee did, which it's the first city that I know of in Oregon that's done it, is they had an all-staff meeting, And they talked about the census at the staff meeting because they wanted the people behind the counter and the people that are out on the street to understand the census. So as questions came up, virtually any city employee they had the same type of presentation that you just received. So they have a good understanding of what's going on. If they ran into someone who maybe spoke with an accent or was foreign born, they would take an extra minute or two and talk about the census and the importance of it. Another thing that we do need to do is work on having a meeting with your senior center, so that I can come in and talk with them about the census and the importance of it. That is something that we would like to do closer to March at that point in time. But I am the lead for the Oregon libraries in ensuring that we have a census resource center in all libraries. That's really going to be the key issue, because whether you have a P.O. box or if you just have questions, people trust the library. There was a study that was done that was commissioned by the U.S. Census, and the question was asked, who do people trust? And a federal employee such as myself gets 0 trust level on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, don't laugh. Now, a state official is about a 3. A local official is a 5. But a librarian is a 7. So if librarians are the trusted individuals, then that's where we need to go. And that's where our people will go to get information. And that's why I think it's really important that we energize the senior center and the libraries, or anywhere else. If you happen to know a large demographic of people that are foreign born, if you know that they have meetings, if you can attend that meeting or have me attend the meeting and talk with them about the importance of the census, that would be very worthwhile.
Thank you.
Yes.
Another important reason for the census, besides the money division, is it appears that Oregon could possibly get a 6th congressional representative.
I'm not allowed to state that.
No.
The money seems to be that there, especially if I get the 4.3, there's a lot of people who strongly believe that.
Right. We'll see.
You said it, not me.
Yeah.
So you're gonna send what, 4 notices?
5, a total of 5.
A total of 5.
Mhm.
If you respond on the first or second one, is it put into the database enough to know that this house or this place has been served or identified, and so we don't need to mail more or
Correct.
come by? So
Yes. That's the beauty of it, yes, is that if you respond right away, then we actually check your box and we do not send you additional mailers.
And is there a map then to be able to look at to know, like, we need to focus as a city to go, there's a whole area, it seems like they aren't being represented and being able to canvass that area? Or?
Exactly, and that will be the first time we'll be able to do that. But yes, we will, just like the AdCan program, you can actually go on there on the census website and find out if someone's gonna be knocking on your door. I live in Happy Valley, and I live around a whole bunch of really tall trees, and so someone will knock on my door to do that, and I've seen it on the map. The same exact thing will happen when we do the non-response follow-up. There will actually be a map where we'll be able to see, and I'll be able to contact you guys and let you know where we're missing holes and come up with some strategies. One of our strategies will be, for example, perhaps sending out a flyer to the school kids so that they can get it home to their parents. But we'll come up with strategies at that time, and we think that that's really going to be helpful this time around to find out where we're not getting the responses that we need.
Yeah, that was the follow-up question. Are you working with the schools out there to help with sending that information out to parents? But how about churches and other organizations like that? Are you working with them as well and getting that information out, or? We have some of us have specific responsibilities, like mine is the library, and it's also the Oregon Food Bank. We have one person who just goes after the people of faith and that type of organization. So yes, we are kind of focusing on various areas. We have another person who is focusing just on the schools. Yes. But we can always use help. If you have anyone that you'd like us to contact and give a presentation, I'd love to. Yes.
So I'll start this off by saying, asking for a friend. What are the penalty or consequence if somebody falsifies information on the census? And then secondly, say somebody's got a warrant out for their arrest, nobody knows where they're at. Now they fill out the information on the census. Is there a cross-reference to those databases?
There is not a cross-reference of the database. That information is considered personally identifiable, and we are not allowed to give out that information. And your first question again, please?
Falsifying information on the census.
It's against law, the federal law, to falsify information. When the citizenship question was still on there, I recommended that if you do not want to answer the question, then don't answer the question, but don't lie about the question. We have never prosecuted anyone for not answering answering the questions. We have if people have lied, so. It's the sin of omission is
Just,
better.
it's important informational
Yes.
pieces,
About
because
both
I think
points.
those are
Oh, yeah.
common things that come up as the reason why people don't respond to census
Definitely,
operations.
yeah, I think you're absolutely right, yes. Any other questions?
Well, thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for coming out. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think there's something right.
Yeah, right. All right, moving on here. We are on to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
I'll second that.
A motion by Counselor Lee, a second by Counselor Peetzold. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to new business. Need to find my script here for the public hearing.
It's the IGA.
The IGA.
No, the IGA was in the
It's in the
consent
consent.
agenda.
Oh, okay.
You just
Sorry.
approved it.
Yeah,
Yep,
too late.
So good. All right, so I am opening public hearing on the wastewater facilities plan. Gonna call for any abstentions. Sure? You gotta go home. Any conflict of interest? I will now call for the staff report. Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in the step where I have a little background on how we got to this point. You know, we started the facilities planning process in February of 2018. And kind of a brief overview of what the facilities planning process is. It kind of reviews the existing condition of the system and looks at down the road at future federal and state regulations that could affect the operation of the treatment plant, and makes some recommendations for improvements in new facilities necessary to accommodate population growth and comply with regulatory requirements. Comes up with some cost estimates, and then takes all this information, develops several alternatives, and ranks those alternatives to recommend a solution that satisfies regulatory, environmental, and financial constraints. And so the upshot, you know, this is kind of like the census presentation was for the mayor. This is the third time I'm sure many of you on the council have seen
Yes.
this presentation. But we thought it's good. It kind of sums up the issues related to the facilities planning process and the issues related to the wastewater system. And Preston Van Meter and Matt Hickey from Murray Smith, the consultants who prepared the facilities plan, are here tonight to review the presentation. And I just want to go over a few milestones. You know, the first time the council saw this plan was in December of 2018. We had a work session on this. We had a public presentation in February of this year, and then we also had a digital version of the plan available on the website, a hard copy at the library, and then we had a public comment period shortly after the plan was made public, and it was extended till August of 2009 of this year, just a month ago. And then we did receive 4 written comments. Those are listed here. And then these comments and responses will be included in the record with any comments that the council gives tonight, or if you choose to leave the record open for comments that would be received between tonight and October 7th, when we propose the council consider adoption of the facilities plan.
So on that, sorry to interrupt, are you going to be just looking for us to carry this hearing over to a future meeting?
Well, that's up to you. I mean, you can close the hearing tonight and say, okay, comments are done. Then we compile those comments and include them in the record at the October 7th meeting, or you can leave it open. That's entirely your call.
Okay.
And, you know, you might hear from the public tonight on those 2 options. And then I did want to go over the tours that it seems like a long time ago, but right at the beginning of the summer, the council and representatives from several interest groups toured over 2 days several advanced treatment facilities in the metro area. We went to the Clackamas County WES plant, the plant in Dundee, and the plant, we didn't, the wetlands treatment area of the plant in Forest Grove. And all three of these facilities produce high quality effluent using the, except for the Forest Grove plant, using the same type of treatment system that's proposed in the facilities plan, a membrane bioreactor. And then since then, we've secured a $500,000 grant from the legislature to further study alternatives for discharge or reuse of the wastewater from the proposed treatment facility. And then also look at options that came up during the public review of the plan, including vetting the possibility of exporting wastewater to either Clackamas County WES and Clackamas or City of Gresham treatment plants. So at this point, the staff is recommending that you take testimony and that we split the process into two pieces. Initially, adopting the plan as it is, and then the actual mechanism by which the discharge takes place would be a separate kind of a mini version of the process, where we look at the green alternatives and the in more detail and see if there are other opportunities other than just a pipe in the river to dispose of the wastewater in the Sandy Basin. And then also issues like temperature and temperature mitigation and things like that would be part of the green alternatives process. We've already started work on some of this. We've had temperature monitoring equipment in the river since June. We've done some water quality monitoring. Preston can probably go into more detail on this as we get through the process, but we've done some sampling for water quality parameters in the Sandy Basin that we think will be part of any sort of new discharge permit. And so some of that work is underway, and that will continue for 5 years. We intend to gather a great deal of information on temperature over a long period of time. There isn't really a lot of temperature information, or water quality information for that matter, on the Sandy River. And so what information has been gathered is just kind of very discrete, like a snapshot in time. We intend to gather it over a longer period of time and have some information that DEQ can use to inform their permit writing process. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the team from Murray Smith.
Welcome back. You always bring the best of news, so I'm so excited to see you here this evening.
Oh, it's so good to be here.
Seriously, welcome.
Thank you all. So, Mike talked a little bit about the presentation, and it's not nearly as long, fortunately. We'll talk a little bit about just an overview of the kind of where we've been and the key challenges that you face, just to recap those, and then just quickly gloss over the recommended plan, so you can move on to the rest of your public hearing. So a little bit just to kind of go back through some background, just to make sure that everyone in the room is up to speed on the challenges you face and what really are the drivers for where we are today. Some history of your wastewater treatment system. The original plant built in the mid-60s. The last time the facility was upgraded was a little over 20 years ago. Not a lot has been done to it since then. I think council heard a little bit about that in the work session before the council meeting tonight. Something to note is there's been kind of a gradual increase in the permit exceedances. Your MPDS permit that regulates the treatment plant started having some challenges in the early 2000s. I don't know that those were significant challenges, but in recent years there's really been kind of a continual period of permit violations that's become a real challenge for the operations of the plant. Some of those related operations, just the operations of the facility itself and maintenance issues. Others related to you get a lot of flows into the system when it rains, and those inundate the treatment plant. So definitely some challenges that need to be addressed at that existing facility. This is an overview of the facility.
Real quick question.
Yep.
So were there any regulatory changes around that point in time as well too, or have the regulations changed around water quality that would have impacted the?
I do not know of any changes in regulations in your MPDS permit over that operating period.
Okay.
Mike Do you? I don't think your permits
Not
changed.
since, 98. Well, you know, some TMDLs in the water basin, that's about it, which don't really affect us.
I don't think the actual permit limits, though, have changed at all. That would have driven violations, which I think. The treatment plant is down at the very do I have a? I don't think I have a pointer, but the treatment plant's about the second blue box from the right. You discharge in the summer season. When you can't go into the creek, into Tickle Creek, you actually irrigate onto a local nursery. Tickle Creek is shown kind of down where the green dot is that shows the existing plant, and then upstream of that is the city of Sandy. One nice thing about your system is it's mostly gravity fed, so there's not a lot of pump stations in the system. You have 6 fairly small pump stations. A lot of the red lines that are shown in the middle of the map are your older concrete lines in the system. Those are the lines where we think you have a lot of the rainwater that's actually getting into the system that causes those really high spikes in flows. Probably that you saw last week and this weekend when it was raining so hard. The blue lines are PVC lines, they're plastic lines. Those are probably newer. Those are newer, tend to not leak as much. They're probably in areas of your system that aren't subject to higher groundwater, which is where we see a lot of the I&I come from.
Before you go back to that last map.
Yes, sir.
How sure are we about the red lines being all concrete? Are those really documented, Mike, or are they estimated? So how do we know what the extent of the problem is?
Yeah, no, I think the material types are right. Some of the stuff we don't have very good information on is the age of the pipes.
Okay. But we're pretty sure about the concrete pipes being in the red.
We're pretty
That's
certain
pretty much it.
about
Okay,
materials, yes.
great, thank you.
So the upper right is kind of a snapshot of your existing system. So on the kind of the left in the black would be your homes and businesses, your services that are connected to the collection system that we showed on the last map. In the middle then is the wastewater treatment plant schematic, and then the 2 lines to the right are the 2 discharge periods that you have in the summertime, discharging or irrigating at local nursery, and in the wintertime when you're allowed in your permit, you discharge to Tickle Creek when the flows are up higher in the creek. So really 4 key challenges that have driven this entire process. Inflow and infiltration, that's your peak winter flows when it rains. A lot of just rainwater makes it into the system. It inundates the plant. We don't actually know the peak flows at the plant because it overwhelms the influent flow meter. We think they're in excess of 10 million gallons a day. The peak capacity of the treatment plant is 7. So we think there are times, probably frequently, where the capacity of the treatment plant's exceeded for extended durations. When the last upgrade was completed, the city's population was 5,000. You're now 10,000. You expect to go to 20,000 in the next 20-year planning horizon. So population growth is definitely something to get out in front of in terms of the upgrades and making sure that you consider that so you can provide for the growth that you're planning. Capacity and footprint, the treatment plant's in really a pretty constrained site at the very low end of town, wetlands surrounded on a couple sides. Difficult to expand the footprint that you would need cost effectively on that site. And then the real key issue, the one that's really driving everything from my perspective, are discharge limitations. So the current treatment plant discharges into the Clackamas River Basin. That's subject to the 3-basin rule. The 3-basin rule prohibits mass load increases, meaning you can't get a year-round discharge into Tickle Creek for your community. I don't know of another community your size on the west side of the Cascades that has a half-year discharge the way you do. It's not practical to continue that process moving forward. Another challenge is that we have these what we call shoulder periods when you're supposed to be irrigating. You have to irrigate at agronomic rates, meaning if it rains too much, you can't irrigate because plants only need so much water. In those periods, if you can't discharge, you have to store. Building that much storage is very expensive, and the matter of where you put it is also in question. Where do you put it out at the nursery, and is that on private property? Do you have control over it? Does the nursery have control over it? There's a whole bunch of other issues that go along with that. So really, those 4 key challenges have led us to where we are now in terms of the recommended plan. Like I said, in the wintertime, discharge into Tickle Creek. Again, subject to the 3-basin rule, no mass load increases. So there is not an opportunity for the city to discharge to Tickle Creek year-round, even if there was capacity in the river to take on additional flows. Summertime, discharge or irrigate at Isley Nursery. There is some storage there, would have to be expanded significantly at the nursery. So those are just framing the key issues. You've all heard these before. I don't think we I need to spend too much time on how we got here, so we're just gonna go straight to an update of the recommended plan and then the phasing. So there are some immediate priorities. The city has an SRF application, and I believe it'll get funded in November, Mike, is that? I believe it was #1 in the state, at least for the region anyway, on the SRF list. So I'm sure you'll get funded. $2.5 million of that would go to doing some work at the treatment plant. That's the existing treatment facility that's needed. The other $3.5 million would go to the collection system rehab that's also needed in implementing the recommendations we have there, which I will talk about shortly. Our approach all the way through the planning process was not necessarily to look at, okay, what's the best way to treat all this water that's in the collection system down at your existing treatment plant, just build bigger treatment facilities for whatever the flows are, but yet not also go in and rip up every line or street in town and replace your entire collection system. It was to find that balance point where you had this optimal investment that was, you gotta do some work on the collection system because you can't let it go forever. You've got to do some work on it in terms of rehabilitation, and you can't afford to build treatment facilities that would treat all of these peak flows you're seeing right now. It's just not cost effective. On the rehabilitation side, there's really two key basins where we found, and those are largely, if you look back at where we had a lot of the concrete lines in town, but these red zones, which we're calling the phase 1 rehabilitation program, are really the two areas where you get the most bang for your buck in terms of reducing inflow and infiltration. The target we've set for peak flow reduction is to get your 20-year peak flow to 14 million gallons per day. We had projected that number in our modeling effort at somewhere around 17.1, so pulling out about 3 to 3.5 MGD of flows during those peak events out of the system would get us to that 14 MGD number. The one challenge with rehabilitation programs is our success is really contingent on a lot of factors that are outside of the control of anyone. So if we are unable to, in these kind of rehabilitating those red zones in the first phase, get those flows down, we would probably recommend that you continue to chase that by looking at how you could do some rehabilitation of the yellow zones, which we would call phase 2. Phase 2 rehabilitation is not funded in the current recommended plan that we have. We hope that through the initial collection system rehab efforts, where you go and do some smoke testing and you try to find inflow sources, meaning direct connections of rainwater, catch basins, roof gutters, things like that, removing those from your system, developing a private I&I policy that allows you to go in and replace laterals all the way up to homes, rather than just replace the main lines. That's where we see the most impact of rehabilitation programs. That citywide plus the focus on those two basins will get you to that the peak flow reduction that we'd like to see in terms of the planning for the treatment side.
May I ask a question? Does that include then the need to also build a stormwater system that may not be existing?
Certainly that has to be a consideration if you have large areas that you have service laterals connected to the source.
It's gotta go somewhere.
Right. Yep. Yes, that it has to be brought into that. Although we didn't do a detailed evaluation of the stormwater system as part of the master plan. So this is a schematic that's similar to the last schematic on the right in the blue. The left is where, in terms of the recommended plan, we recommended splitting the treatment system about in half. We continue using the existing wastewater treatment plant, continue with the discharge to Tickle Creek irrigation at the nursery, but we pick off about half the flow, construct a new satellite, what we call a satellite treatment facility, with a new discharge year-round to the Sandy River being the best option that we had come up with in looking at past plans and then in looking at costs for various other options. This is a little bit more of a snapshot of the system from a city geography perspective. You can see the existing wastewater treatment plant off to the upper left. In the middle of town, there would be a diversion pump station installed strategically at a place where we think we can pick up about half of the flows during normal times. It would be pumped to a piece of city-owned property that I believe was an original location for your wastewater treatment plant. So we go back there, reconstruct a new facility. That would be what we call a satellite facility, and I'll explain why in a minute. That would then discharge to what we're proposing right now is the Sandy River on property that the city owns that crosses the river. The MBR, here's a rough layout for the MBR facility. It would have a peak capacity of 7 MGD. That means the existing 7 MGD capacity of the existing facility plus the new facility gets you to the 14 MGD number that we've targeted with your reduction in I&I. We would have 2 pipelines coming into the plant from the diversion pump station, 1 pipeline pumping raw wastewater into the plant for treatment. Another smaller pipeline would return solids back around to the other side of the pump station. Those solids from the treatment facility would go down to the existing treatment plant where they would be treated. So on this site, you would have state-of-the-art treatment. This is about the most cost-effective and best treatment we can provide in the wastewater industry, that being an MBR, a membrane bioreactor. Very high-quality effluent. It's very difficult to tell the difference between MBR effluent and drinking water. Those of you that went to the Tri-City plant saw an example of that with the jars sitting up there. Very compact footprint, easy to construct these facilities of this size into half to 1 acre site.
At the ribbon cutting, I'm drinking the water, so I'm holding you to this, right? So you're good with this? You still
I'll
stand
offer
by
that
it?
I'll drink it with you.
All right, all right, all right.
I'll take the picture.
I might bring my
Any
own
illness
filter,
is
but
not
I will
covered
drink
under
it.
insurance.
The one thing to note about this that will come up as the conversation continues with your community is this is a liquids only treatment process. Solids will be processed down at the existing plant. The odors from treatment plants tend to come from the solid side of the plant. So this side is really a liquids only facility. If you were on any of the tours we did this summer, there weren't odoriferous sites. So I can't commit to no odors or anything like that, but this is the best opportunity to control odors is to process the solids in a different location, which is what this proposal is. That's also why we call it satellite treatment, is that we only have liquid stream process. Here's the big numbers. The first phase we estimate at somewhere south of $60 million. The second phase, where we would go back in and do a lot of the work that came up in the public hearing or in the council work session about the existing facility, adding a primary clarifier. Carl is there. Conversion to anaerobic digestion is also there in that plant in that phase. And then the third phase is really a continuation of the kind of the expansion of the MBR facility to 7 MGD. So build an initial 3.5 MGD capacity, and then about 10 years later, as you need it, increase that by adding 2 more trains, all along continuing the rehabilitation program. Beyond 2040 or beyond this planning horizon, then there's in the plan built in a new effluent pump station from the existing treatment plant up to the new outfall to the Sandy River. That will take a longer time to fund because you've got to find a route through town. So that's an unfunded project that's outside of the 20-year planning horizon, but yet in the plan for eventually pulling the city out of Tickle Creek and the Clackamas River Basin entirely. One of the things we're working on right now that was brought up in Mike's opening statements was the green alternatives, the discharge study. So the city did secure, thanks to some awesome testimony, very fast, quick words in a really short amount of time, $500,000 for the study. So we're in the process of scoping that advanced study that would look at the Roslyn Lake option. Also the anti-degradation evaluation for the discharge to the river, looking at, okay, are there other options for actually putting a pipeline in the river along a 2 or 3 mile stretch, continuing to do some public outreach, looking at water recycling options, continuing to monitor temperatures, completing the temperature evaluation, things like that. So basically help us kind of develop further that, okay, where's all this water going to go that we're going to make in this really nice facility that we're going to build in the middle of town. Next steps on the funding side, the SRF application should be a formality because you're really high on that intended use plan, so I'm sure you'll get funded. So that $6 million loan will be finalized toward the end of the year. November, we'll also hear back on the WIFI application that was submitted with notice of funding, or there will be a 1-year time where if you are going to get the money, you'll have the ability to put together an application that would have to include a 30% pre-design for the upgrades that you have requested funding for. The immediate actions really are driven by the SRF funding, which is to get to work at the existing treatment plant, and also jump into the first phase of the collection system rehab. 2025 or 2020 and beyond, then we would implement the recommended plan in terms of phases, both on the collection side and on the treatment side. I'm happy to answer any questions if I haven't. addressed them at the various times we've been here talking about this.
I've asked mine.
Yeah, I've heard it out several times now, so.
All right, thank you. I'm now going to call for any public testimony on our facilities plan. If you would like to provide public testimony, please state your name and address for the record, and I'll provide 5 minutes.
Oh,
Please-
just sign here.
Please remember to state your name and address for the record, and welcome.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Janet Davis, and I live at 40601 Southeast Kubitz Road, and that's river frontage right on the Sandy River. And so thank you guys for looking for the $500,000 to look for the green alternatives. That's really, really what I wanted to comment on, is that was an excellent thing to do. I hope it's enough money for you guys to accomplish what you want. And my biggest concerns is the temperature, the
Yeah.
release. And I know that, I mean, you just now addressed some of that, but definitely in the public information that's given out, I really like to see that that's clearly addressed and clearly available for those of us who are interested in protecting the fish that are in the river, or we want to be in the river. So that's pretty much all I had to say. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I would just comment, we advocated hard for the green studies, and we're right with you. I mean, that's what we're concerned about, and we're wanting to look at everything we possibly can, all of our options. So thank you. Yeah.
So just, Ms. Dana Davis said something about getting a chance to look at some of the temperature changes. We do intend to be able to give all of our data collections on the Sandy River we're doing now out to the rest of the folks, so everybody can see what those are, see what and be transparent. I'm not seeing it up and down.
Yeah.
There it is. Okay.
Welcome. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor, city councilors. I'm Julie Stevens. I live at 12933 Southeast Ten Eyck Road. I'm the adjoining property, the adjacent property immediately to Roslyn Lake. I'm sorry David Dukeman isn't here because he knows the history of this. I've lived there for 19 years. And the previous property owner, PGE, when they took Roslyn Lake out, recontoured the lake, as you probably know. They also filled the drop line that went down to the power station with concrete. And we immediately started flooding. Our property started flooding. Murray Smith did a hydrology study, and so after 6 years of working with PGE, we finally convinced them to put a new culvert under the road, create an outlet system so that the water that's now accumulated on Roslyn Lake, because there is a lot of water that's still accumulated on Roslyn Lake, there are multiple springs there, and it doesn't drain all that fast. The property across the street, Christine Allstat, I thought she was going to be here tonight to speak to this, but the water currently goes over to them. They have a deeded right to that water, and then it drops down to the Sandy River. Previously, one of the reasons Roslyn Lake was taken out, not only to remove the Marmot Dam that they could not get earthquake approval on, was to protect the fisheries in the Bull Run River, because the Roslyn Lake was so shallow that the water was too hot, and what was dropped into the river was too hot. So when I hear about cooling the water at Roslyn Lake and bringing down as much as, what was it, 50,000 cubic, whatever, like 4 feet, covering 50 acres at a 4-foot level daily, there's only 180 acres at Roslyn Lake. So in 4 days, you're gonna fill it up, and I'm very concerned about getting flooded again. So I hope that you will look at all of those things very, very seriously and completely. As one of the neighboring property owners, do not flood me, please.
Yeah, with treated wastewater.
That you can drink.
Well, there is that.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
John Taylor, my address is 18,000, Langen Sands. I have a question that was right at the end of this gentleman's presentation here about a $10 million loan to the city. I said, he talked about before, it sounded like he was talking about grants, but he said a $10 million loan. How does that get repaid?
Oh, well, I mean, we repay it. I don't know if Jordan or Mike, if you have a more.
So the application we have in now is for the SRF loan through DEQ, and that's a $6.3 million loan that would be repaid through wastewater rates, and that's the next thing on the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah.
Way to tee us up there, Jordan. Thank you. Yeah. Any further testimony? Okay. Seeing none, I will call for a staff recap and recommendation.
So I think one of the feedback we would want to hear from the council is whether you want to hold the record open until October 7th.
Yep.
for the
I would
adoption of
like
the
to.
facilities plan.
Yeah, I don't see any reasons why we wouldn't.
Okay, how are you?
I didn't know if you guys had a recap, or I'll just look for a motion to continue the hearing until our next meeting.
Make a motion to continue the hearing till our next meeting, October 7th.
Second.
All right, got a motion by Councilor Hamlin, second by Councilor Exner. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Moving on, I will open a public hearing on our proposed water and wastewater rate increases. Are there any abstentions from the hearing body?
Is that one where we get to make an option?
Oh, man.
I'm gonna be influenced by it. I'm gonna have to pay for that.
Yeah, well, I think so.
So there's some.
Okay. Can we use that?
We couldn't get out of the last one. So.
Yeah. Conflict of interest? No. Calling for a staff report.
Okay, good evening, council and mayor. So we've heard about the current wastewater treatment plant and the operations there. We've heard the presentation on the wastewater facilities plan and the costs, and sort of the plan there on what needs to be done. This is the unfortunate part of how do we pay for it. And so last meeting on September 3rd, the council saw the updated rate model. We contracted with the FCS group to create a new model for our wastewater and water rates, which was needed on a lot of fronts. One, we have this new wastewater facilities plan, which has a capital plan component, and the model also feeds in our information about our current operations, and also some assumptions about certain measures like cost escalation and growth that we kind of played with the different numbers there as we're assuming different factors on growth in customer accounts, not just population growth, and then also assumptions like interest rates and revenue bonds and things like that that also feed into the model. The main point on the model is that it does take into account what our current operating costs are, so personnel, operations and maintenance, equipment replacement, things like that. But the major factor is covering our debt ratios and be able to pay back the amount of financing that we'll need to do in order to pay for that system facilities plan that you just saw the presentation on for the third time. So the rate model was completed. We had a chance at the previous meeting to kind of play with those different tools. It sounds like there might be interest in taking a look at it again and doing some different testing of assumptions and looking at what different rate increase amounts do in terms of meeting our revenue requirement. Our major focus is not just adopting rates. We're not adopting rates for the next 5-10 years to complete the facilities plan. Really, it's focused on this next year in order to fund the things that we heard that need to be done on our current wastewater treatment plant and also our system that's old and leaky. And also, this rate increase will set us up to be able to have that debt coverage ratio for the future years and have our fund balance be healthy enough to flow through and the bond agencies would like to see. So I talked a little bit about these assumptions. We covered those at the previous meeting on what's built into the rate model. On the water side, I'll start with this because it's a little bit easier, easier to stomach. The rate increases that we budgeted as a starting point to build into our proposed budget and ultimately adopted budget was 4%. The rate model produced another 5% that would be needed to be implemented this winter, so a total of 9%. There's some projections for out years in the report. Again, this is sort of to set us up for what is coming down in the future, but the council would update the rates on an annual or adopt rates on an annual basis by resolution. The good thing about that too is that things change, right? As the design and the engineering takes place on these construction projects, and as we get the bids in, that we can make updates in real time on what the rate increases need to be. So water rates are structured with class, by meter size, and also by volume. We're not proposing for both water and wastewater any changes to that methodology or structure. Universally, we're looking at 9%, and then as you dive into the report and you see the different proposals for how that affects the different classes, volume, and meter size. The main point here, though, is because here's the good news. Sandy is very affordable. As we look at our position in Clackamas County compared to other cities. On the water side, the average customer that uses 6 CCF, which is what, 750 gallons.
4,500 gallons.
Yeah.
A month.
The average home in Sandy with 6 CCF per month. Water charge on the utility bill is about $23. It's going to go up under these proposed rates by a little more than $1, and that still is very affordable for this next year on the water side. Different customer classes will see different impacts, but overall, like I said, it's a 9% proposal on a pretty affordable amount to begin with.
Should it be? And the reason I ask that is we just had a presentation at our work session that we have some stuff coming down the road. We're faced with a 98%, like, do it all at once increase here in the next month on our wastewater. I mean, are we just setting ourselves up to have to do the same thing? Because I'm telling you, these folks are going to feel, $25 a month come here in a couple of months all at once. I mean, should we be getting more aggressive so that folks aren't feeling it all at once?
Well, I think we'll have a similar conversation that we're having tonight about wastewater that we will with water in the future as we get the water master plan back. I don't think it'll be on the order of magnitude that we're looking at with the wastewater system. But you also heard from Veolia that as they're prioritizing projects, the water system will have needs, and the big elephant in the room is that filtration project that will run the system with the city of Portland, and how the city of Sandy connects to that, either by building a pipe or our own filtration plant. And that's a question that will be answered over the next year in our water master plan. So we'll probably be back at the table with updated figures as we get better cost estimates and we get direction on what our system needs and how we make those choices. I think it's a little early, and honestly, council has to weigh, we're looking at massive increases on the wastewater side.
Sure.
You probably don't want to do water at the same time, and maybe, stack those so that you're not hitting, huge increases at the same time. So, to wastewater, the bad news, as we looked at on the 6th, the recommendation was a 98% increase over the 4% that we had in our budget, so effectively, yes, a doubling of the rates, and for a family or an average single-family home, that a doubling of the rate goes from Sandy being the most affordable in our peer cities in Clackamas County to in that middle of the pack range in comparison. And as you look at those other cities on the list, those are cities that are either planning or have completed reinvestments in their systems, and my guess is only a matter of time until some of these other communities will have to do the same consideration. Westland's an interesting case because they actually have some more limits on what they can do, which puts them into a more of a bind, but even their rates will be comparable to the proposed rates. Cities that are not on this list, which are quite a bit more than what you see here, would be, on the water side would be Tigard, but on the wastewater would be like Portland and Lake Oswego, which are even further more expensive. So this is the proposal. I know we wanted also another chance to revisit the model, and we could do that, and look at how the proposal can be, you know, tweaked depending on what kind of assumptions we want to make. And I think the model is geared towards looking at the current year, obviously, because that's the best information that we have, and that's the fiscal year that we're focused on in terms of what we need to do in the next year with our capital. So, you know, the big part of that program is paying for that loan that we hope to receive this year. Once we finish the paperwork and they give us the money, we want to get started right away because, well, DEP is very interested in us doing that. And so the way we pay back, answer the gentleman's question, that loan is by raising rates, so that can then
Cover your payment.
pay that interest and principal. So I can pull up that model,
Yeah.
dive into that, but we can answer your question.
Did you have a specific question on it, or were you wanting to just toy around with it a little?
No, I specifically had a question. If you go back to the current model that we were talking about, that makes it the $29 or whatever it is, back. There it is.
Oh, it's the screenshot of what the dashboard.
Right. So my question is I understand it, the blue color is what we would be seeing in terms of having to have money for if we did the 98%, 16, 15, 10, so on out through 2026. But I think that red dotted line is the minimum, the minimum amount of money we have to have in our accounts to pay our loans, correct? That's what that dotted red line is?
I think that's our funding.
That's the coverage ratio for the debt, yeah.
Okay, so what I was thinking of is it looks to me like there's a distance between the valley on 2026 and that red line, and I'm wondering, could we reduce the increase to the point where it just approaches that dotted red line and give us less of a percentage increase by doing that, just to get to what we absolutely need, rather than putting more on there? Because it looks like as we enter the 2029, 2030, we really have quite a bit of additional dollars in there. I know we've got more projects to do and that kind of thing, but I'm wondering if we couldn't bring down that 98% increase to maybe 90% or something.
Well,
Carl, my concern with that though is that this has also got programmed in the annual growth of 2.8%. And I think for us to sustain that through 2026, I'm worried about that. So I'd actually like to see us be more conservative with our growth estimates.
I was told that 2.8 is actually very conservative though, and that especially with the past 3 or 4 years worth of observation, that's probably pretty conservative.
Population's
See,
tough though, because remember, I was on Shadow Council in the 90s during the 2040 master plan. 10 years in, they threw it out the window because we weren't hitting the population marks because the recession hit and everything else, and that
Right.
affected our population. Sorry.
No, that's just what I'm concerned
Yeah.
with, is the pending recession and
Yeah.
the impact it has on growth. I'm curious to see what the previous recession growth rates were, and maybe even use that as a model for estimates. Because
So what-
I think I want to keep it low, but I also don't want to put us so close to the line where recession hits and then we don't have that in fund balance and have to do another substantial rate increase in 2026. That's another 98% because
Well-
the recession's hit us hard.
What I was thinking of, we're responding back and forth, okay?
Yeah,
All right.
good.
So I'm thinking that if we do see that we're having troubles, because let's say we have a recession in 2 or 3 years, which I've heard some people claim, wouldn't it be easier to increase from 16%, say in 2 or 3 years, to 20% versus 98% today? Maybe drop it down and then see how we head for our growth population projections, as well as any recession that might come in, and then adjust as we go through time. I guess I'm trying to figure out a way to reduce that initial injection of money
Cause I think it's, cause we need startup cash.
It's
is
Got
why
that
we're
part,
doing that
got that
big.
part.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's what we did in the model when we went back and forth with the gentleman that brought it to us, was that exact question. And the problem is when you don't have that initial inflection there, then you don't have that, it's like a retirement plan, right? You don't have that, the compounding in there to be able to make it work out. So when you adjust that line, like we saw in there, it only changes pennies on that to have that thing drop down below the red line for the way the model works. So it's not that much of adjustment, but the overall longevity of that is pretty detrimental, especially if we go through a recession or.
Well, the next thing I'd remind council of is I asked that question about what would happen if we were able to be like a community like Sweet Home, remember, where if we could get like $8 million from the legislature in 2 years, what would happen?
Mm-hmm.
And it moved it down like
Not very much.
yeah, it wasn't very much, and it wasn't, and it couldn't affect the 98%. It was only affecting future rate increases going forward. And so for me, and I'm like the most, I feel very resistant to this in a lot of ways, knowing that my hands are kind of tied on it, is for me, I started to view it more as a plan for the worst case scenario, and then start working our tails off for the best case scenario. You know, where we start to make the investments we need to today, and then we go nuts going to the federal government, to the state, and WIFIA loan, you know, going nuts trying to get as much dollars to help us out with this thing as possible to affect those future rate increases or to go down.
Yeah.
I'll let you respond.
The problem with that, and I'm sure you're aware of, is that we're talking about November
Yep.
with a 98% increase, 20 some odd dollars a month on top of what a normal single family would be expected to be. So no matter how much money we go after, we become our elected officials' nightmare in the legislature. It's not going to be a difference because we're going to collect that 98% increase just right away. So
right, but
really,
there's future increases. There's like, you know, on these projections,
Sure, 16 and
16 and
15%.
15.
Which are all higher than we've done, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess all I was doing is looking for a proposal to get it down to the minimum, and I get your concern about what happens if all these other issues have also come into effect, but I think that that's the pessimistic side of the world, okay? I feel like I know a fair amount of folks who are in my age category, although I'm not into the limited income category at the moment. Maybe I'll enter that in the future sometime, but there are a lot of folks that are on restricted incomes, and a $25 a month increase for water could very well be an issue for people.
I apologize ahead of time for saying this. Those were concerns that previous councils should have been going over since 2003, when we started getting fines over and over and over again, and we didn't do any audit checks or anybody or anything for 15 years on the contracting firm that was in here. I mean, I'm really upset about this, right? I mean,
Not the only one.
And this is a big increase. So I think the time for those considerations, it's been the leadership in this community since 2003 to do no strategic budgeting on this thing is it's shocking, and I'm angry and I'm disappointed in it. But I can't continue to lead this community down that kind of, you know, let's rosy colored glasses. Let's hope for the best. We've got to, you know, look the barrel in the eye and make some hard decisions here. I really strongly feel that way. I'm sorry, Councilor Lee.
Yes, I concur that there's too much risk in changing the formula that we've already set. We need to do the 98%. Don't have much choice.
I agree with you. We hired an expert that is concerned about the numbers. You met them all. It wasn't about these other outside influences that are just about the numbers, and the numbers did not lie as you changed the number from one up down to the other. So, but it did affect where we would land on that, and so this is the best proposal that came out of those numbers.
We do need to open up for public comment, and then we can come back to discussion afterwards. Yeah. Any public comment on the rate increases? Yeah, please do step up to the podium.
Sure.
Please remember to say your name and address.
Absolutely. My name is Greg Becker. I live at 14585 Bluff Road. I'd like to say hello to our new mayor, city council, and our city manager. I attended the last public meeting we had on the public safety fee. And I gotta say, here we go again. Okay? Every time the council wants money for projects, instead of coming to the public for it, they take it from the constituents in the form of additional fees, additional tax increases, and in this instance, absorbent water and wastewater hikes. We voters thought in the last city election we would change some of the leadership up of the city and that it would bring change in how we do business. But it's still business as usual. We come to the city meetings and we offer viable alternatives, only to be dismissed because the council has already made up its mind. And that the public comment was docketed only because you had to do it. We voters elected you to represent us, and contrary to belief, we do have long memories. Enough is enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Mayor, I hope you excuse me for leaving. I promised a couple of little ones here, Dairy Queen.
Well, hey, I know that one. Thank you for attending
Thank you.
this evening's
Thank
meeting. Yeah.
Are you leaving?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, he said Dairy Queen.
Can I go too?
That's the only reason why.
Well, cotton candy blizzards are almost done, I hear, so.
Don't give them any ideas.
Have a nice evening. Any further public comment?
I made the comment about everybody out there using their mic because you guys are not all coming through.
Oh.
These don't amplify to the
Oh,
room.
you're right.
They aren't in the room, it's just on the recorded. These don't come across in the room.
They're just for the recording. Yeah.
Oh, what are they for?
The internet.
The
The
internet.
recording of-
We're live. We're being streamed. We'll
try harder.
We'll
We'll
try
do
harder
better.
to do that. Absolutely. Any other comment? All right, I'll go back to council. We'll eventually be carrying it, so you guys know, I'll eventually be looking for a motion to carry this to our next meeting, but it's kind of one of our chances to speak up and give direction going into that meeting as well.
Well, I'm gonna go on record as also being highly annoyed by being put in this position of looking down the barrel of a loaded gun, having to make huge rate increases for a facility that I feel should have been being planned for over the last however many years. So.
And I'll agree with you. I mean, I've been on council a long time, but you know, one of the actions that we took many years ago when we were being brought some other rate increases in Sandy was like, whoa, what's going on here for other departments? And it was we didn't raise rates, and then it was an all-at-once type of rate system. And so we started changing that model a few years ago. This one was not brought as far forward to us in that. Unfortunately, can't do anything about that. But we did do that on others, and we started that progress. So I want to continue that progress in making sure we evaluate and review those others as well as just not only this one, but others as well.
And I want to stay on that looking ahead, right? I would challenge all of us to be what's kind of termed as professional skeptics, right? I mean, it's very much our duty as a governing board of this community to serve as one of a skeptical board where we are really asking those deep diving, penetrating questions and stuff when proposed with things, and when we have things, continuous violations that come up, we need to not be afraid to ask the hard question and the challenge, and I think all of us are up to that task and doing that from this point forward. But I think that this needs to be a learning experience for our community as a whole on how we need to strategically budget and not be afraid to kind of tackle the big issues.
It's amazing to look at the record of lack of raises when we know the cost of living was going up 2% and 3% every year and no change in any of the rates. Then all of a sudden, it's going to be 98% because of that.
Counselor Exner.
A couple of things. As Jeremy was saying earlier, we did increase the rates for the water, wastewater fees, but at a small amount, not knowing that there was going to be a complete renovation of the entire system. And it is our desire, it was our desire since I've been around here since 8 years now, that it's been to keep the minimum, keep the rates at a low, but fairly often, rather than large at any bigger space of time between increases. And so that was part of that thought, not knowing that we would have to have this huge expense to put in a new system. So there's that statement. And I guess I am concerned, highly concerned. Not only do we have the safety fee that just went into effect, that we're about to put in this 20 some odd dollar a month increase for the water, wastewater. We've got the water treatment plant probably coming down the tube on us. We know are gonna be proposing one for the pool. By the time we add those all up, I think as much as we are responsible for how we affect our constituents, how we affect me, I'm in this bunch, and I know each one of us are in that. Every increase, every dollar increase not only affects the rest of the city, it affects the council as much.
My wife reminds me of that consistently.
That right? Okay. Yeah. So my wife does too. So in this particular case, I guess I am still adamant that at least we find a way to increase even if it's pennies per month, to the minimum that it would take to cover our account, our bill, our loan that we need to be able to pay for to get us through this system. So, and I realize it may only be pennies, but in terms of how I represent those who call me up at night, send me emails, talk to me at Safeway, they want me to be as penny pinching as I possibly can. And so that's the reason why I'm looking at this. I would propose that at least as one alternative is that we get as close to that red dotted line as we can. And I get the part about recession, something goes awry. You know, I worked for the Forest Service for 30 years, and I know every single budget I put together almost always had a problem with it at the very end, which meant more money, not less money. I'm very seldom save money. But at this point in my life, I see a lot of increases coming, and I guess I'm really thinking let's put something in there that covers the bill and no more. I'm done.
Stand this way.
So, Carl, I appreciate that, and I think for what we're talking about tonight and what we'll be deciding on in the near future is gonna be the 98% increase for 1 year. And I think what we aren't voting on is the rate plan over the next years. And so I think there is an opportunity to evaluate that. I don't think we can get away from that 98% on that first year, but there may be a possibility where maybe growth is higher, or maybe we're getting a better interest rate on our loan and we can evaluate that, which we will as we set rate increases on an annualized basis. And so maybe that 16 is 14, or maybe it's 24. But we will have that opportunity to look at that on an annual basis. I also want to maintain some level of a cushion, but not a cushion that's so large that it's just gouging ourselves and our taxpayers as well too. So.
All right.
Make a motion to continue the hearing until October 7th, our next meeting.
I'll second.
A motion by Councilor Hamlin, a second by Councilor Schultz. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Be an October
Mayor, if I
meeting.
can just add a couple things. There's a few things that we can look at to bring back as we look at those out years and tighten up to that debt coverage ratio. One thing that just dawned on me tonight, you also have the SDC methodology coming for you on October 7th, and as we talked about on the 6th, that increase was not reflected in those rates, and so I want to make sure we sharpened our pencil and look at that, because we might be able to squeeze a few numbers know, again, the order of magnitude so large, it's still, you know, a large increase, but maybe we could squeeze a few percentage points. But we'll sharpen our pencils on that. I pulled up this slide. I originally wasn't going to, really focus on this, but I think it kind of speaks to that public comment and things you hear from the community, that there is this pride that Sandy is very affordable, and that is something to be proud about. That it's been, managed really well financially, but it does eventually catch up to you when you do have to invest in these massive infrastructure programs. And the council has done a fantastic job of trying to secure state funding, and we're going for a federal loan that has a very favorable interest rate. But you sit at that dais, you hear it, you feel that pressure of keeping rates low. And really the focus over the last couple of years on this program has been to get this facilities plan done, to know what kind of problem are we facing and how much is it going to cost. And I know, I wasn't here, but I know there's probably pressure felt to not have to jump the gun until we really have those figures in place to start knowing what we need to do to increase rates. So not to defend prior councils or management or anything like that, but you do sit in a position where you feel the pressures of making sure that our infrastructure is sound and appropriately funded, but at the same time keep them as low as possible. So my recommendation going forward though is something that a lot of cities do now as a best practice. At least index the rates for cost indexing, construction cost indexing, so that there's minimal, usually it's a couple percent or so, that would just be built into the rates on an annual basis so that we don't fall behind. Because one thing that you'll see in the report is in both the water and wastewater, we were just covering our O&M costs, and there wasn't really any cushion for system reinvestment. So, talking about the water treatment plant and the current wastewater treatment plant, there wasn't really much money in the current rate and the rate structure for having any extra capital dollars for making any investments. And so having that little cushion of the cost indexing is pretty critical for just keeping up with operations and maintenance and personnel, let alone any other small capital. So something to keep in mind as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay. You're still up, though. You're still in the hot seat. You're still in the hot seat.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Come on.
We're to report from the city manager.
Actually, one ask tonight, something that came up from our last meeting. We had that conversation about the bypass study and funding that. We want to get that started as soon as possible. We didn't have a chance to actually get the IGA done and on the agenda, but I was actually going to just use this as an opportunity to get the council's approval to execute that IGA with ODOT. We did have a meeting. I did express the questions and interest that the council had about keeping the city's contribution at that $70,000 limit, and also through the TSP study, making sure that we address any alternatives that the bypass would be addressing with the traffic issues. So they're open to that. I just want to get your approval for executing the IGA so we can move forward on the bypass study. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. A couple of quick things. We have a community survey meeting this Thursday. Councilor Smallwood, Schultz, and Mayor Pulliam, thank you for participating. That's another thing that we're moving quick on, trying to get those survey questions brought back to the council so we can start that. If you've checked your email since this afternoon, you probably saw an email from Kelly O'Neill about a certain development and a community meeting that's also happening this week. There's some interest around that. Just a word of caution on ex parte contacts. You're welcome to talk to staff about it, but this could be one of those tricky development applications that could make its way to council at some point. So be aware about that. But there'll probably be some community conversations. This is a large subdivision that is being proposed in the southern part of town, that there's some concerns, and so we actually kind of requested or recommended that they would hold a community meeting to let people hear about what's going on and what the proposal is. So that's what's happening at the library on the 18th. I'm sure this will come up in council reports, but the Rip City rally was pretty cool, and it was good to see the mayor and a couple councilors there. Looks like kids were having a good time, and the weather just
was awesome.
just right for it.
Couldn't
So
get in bed.
I was
it worked
nervous.
out. Yeah,
Good.
yeah, it was great. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Councilor Schultz.
I had a library meeting this past week. I'm sure some of you have heard of the program they're launching this fall, the Library of Things. I'm excited about it. They're gonna have lots of different things that you can check out. I guess Instant Pot was a big one that people wanted to see. So you can check it out for a week, see if you like it. Things like party equipment, home and garden stuff that you only need to use once. You'll be able to check it out at the library. So
What about the wood chipper? Can I get that from the library?
we're gonna put that on the shelf there. So yeah, fun program. I'm excited to see what we get and what we can.
So are you accepting like donations for that?
Sounds like not
library, or-
yet.
Okay.
Hopefully, eventually,
Yeah.
we may be able to. Right now, we have a grant that is being used to fund the initial
Are
purchase.
these secondhand donations or?
You cannot bring your stuff to the library stand.
Ah, we go,
It's like Goodwill wouldn't take it.
Went to the Action Center, went to Goodwill,
So that's a
The mayor's
no.
socks.
Yeah.
But yeah, we should see that start to roll out in the next little bit here, and it should be fun. And that's all I got.
Right, thank you. Councilor Exner.
I got a question, Mike. What's the status of our sidewalk between here and Vista Loop? Do we know anything new?
Next week.
We just signed the right-of-way agreement, they're restarting that. We have to go back through all these agreements because the state contribution changed, so all the numbers have changed. So, we may just, in lieu of bringing those back to the council, sign, I think the mayor signed the original, fund exchange IGA, staff signed the right-of-way IGA. We can get some consensus, just, since they're basically the same agreements that have just changed because of the state contribution exchange. That would speed things up if we could bring those through each time, just changing the numbers.
Very good.
So am I hearing that our contribution might go down a little bit? Just
No.
No.
It won't go up.
Okay.
Very much as-
Hmm, all
We're
right.
betting against the
That's where-
con.
That's where we're at. I think they've, signed the consultant contract. They're starting on the right of way.
Okay, thank you. A report on the Rip City thing myself. I was one of the my office was one of the businesses that had put up a table and a canopy, and I tell you, it was probably, for us, it was very positive. We happened to be in a great location because the lineup to go to play the basketball hoop thing went right by our front table, and we had a couple of raffles there, and boy, we got plenty of attention, lots of visibility. So from the business side of the Rip City thing was just really positive that way too, and I'll let whoever wants to talk about the rest of it as well. I want to report back about the tree committee a little bit. So council, we got a couple things that I'd like to hear back from you on this one real quickly, and I will send you a follow-up email. But I also want to present it out there. First off, we've had 3 meetings so far in our committee, and the first one was pretty much a kind of get organized, kind of figure out what's going on, and then we came to the council to get some ideas about what we should be moving forward on as a committee, and you gave us some of those as a way to move forward on them, things about being a tree city, things about getting kind of a branding of what the large trees and such in the city of Sandy is something that we like and we want to keep. Also, you told us that we wanted to be back and done by the end of this month. And I have to tell you, we're probably not going to make it by the end of this month. 3 meetings is what we've been able to schedule in between the staff's busy schedule and the other persons in that committee. It's been tough to put people together. We have done some things to get forward, and I'll talk about those in a second. So first off, we're not going to get done by September. So we're thinking more like at the end of the month, the year, I mean. So we have a few more things to work on. So there's that first sort of thing out there.
What do you guys think the consequences should be?
Extra meetings.
He's gotta come up with a rate increase difference.
For the trees,
out of
right,
his own
yeah.
salary.
So, just so you know, you can do all you want to, but we're still not gonna make it by end of this month. So a couple of things that have come through in terms of what we're talking about that we've got some good consensus on is that we are really doing well about understanding the kind of trees that it takes to make a good brand of what the city of Sandy needs to have. And so it's in that Douglas fir, the 24 to 36 inch. There's other species involved in that too. We're thinking about, but it might also include deciduous trees as well as the conifer trees and some things that are happening in terms of climate warming. The Douglas fir tree may not be the most perfect tree to replant because of warming conditions. So there may be some other types of species that look like the brand that we're after, but respond to the warming and drying climates.
Start bringing in the pine trees.
Yeah, there's some other.
Yeah, business and boring, that'd really be happy about that.
Don't want to get into the weeds, but just so you know that we are talking about that. A second thing that we really got involved in, especially this last meeting, was what do you do when you present a tract of land, a development that doesn't have even a correct amount of trees to start off with, and you know you're going to lose because of roads and houses and so on. And that process, how do you put that process together that would make it so that we do have the appropriate number of trees? And one of the things that we're kind of really chomping through the business of, and it will come to you, but kind of give us an idea, give me some feedback on it before we have the next meeting, is that first off, we want to see as much as possible the trees that are on site be the trees that we leave. So if we can find ways to move roads around, move houses around, and so on. The second step would be if that's not possible and we're already below or just has to go below, that we mitigate on site. We can't really don't really want to look at going on outside of the tract of land as much as we can. We want to put it all within that tract of land. The third step in, if you can't do that one, go to the next, which would be to look at adjacent or relatively adjacent stands of trees to improve, to increase the citywide number of trees. And so looking at some of these fish sites, looking at some of these park areas, maybe finding a place where we can increase the total number, maybe not on that tract itself, but in adjacent zones or parks or facilities that might keep that numbers up in the city. And then finally, one thing that came up was kind of interesting. We haven't had a chance to talk it too much through, but in kind of a cap and trade kind of a thing, where if we have a development or a tract of land that we're developing a plan for, and we have far more trees than what we would expect and the city requires, maybe using that as a way to trade with other tracts of land that there's just no way we're going to. Rocks, too much water, the kind of things that you're just not going to get the number of trees you want. And I guess I would appreciate some feedback about those three possibilities and how that looks for what you're thinking of. And then also we're working on the codes itself. There's some specific day-to-day minutiae about the code that we're looking at, so we're involved in that. So feedback now. I'll send you an email if you want to feedback that way too.
You want to start?
Yeah, so I had some about the tree code committee, and that was the only thing I was going to talk about, so I can
go for it.
But I also reserve the ability to think of some new ideas by the time it gets there.
Yeah.
Over the last few weeks, I've been communicating with PGE, and I think we made a huge mistake by not thinking of them on being on this tree committee. Of being one of the #1 major players in those that have to trim trees and manage trees in the right of way, that they have policies to do that, and we're planting trees that aren't the actually correct tree to be putting under power lines because they need to be cut down after a few years because they get too tall, or that the roots themselves are growing into the ground, into their vaults and those type of things that are then having to be removed as well. It just seems really not a great idea. They have a full-time arborist who lives here right outside Sandy city limits here as well.
And he went to Cottrell Elementary, so he's brilliant.
But he's been the arborist for a long time for PGE and has been frustrated. And I was chatting with him the other day a couple of times about, he's like, I can't believe you guys have it. Because I was saying, oh, we have this tree committee. He goes, why isn't PGE part of it? I'm like, you're right. I'm sorry. We forgot that when we put them together. We had real estate, we had developers, we had citizens, we had people from the Forest Service, but you know, for someone that comes through and needs to knock down the trees and top them because they are where they're at, we should be probably planting trees that are approved by them. And I would recommend that we add to that committee the PG arborist.
Response, it's already at 20.
You know, it may blow it up, but I think it was short-sighted of us not to do that. I'll take responsibility. I mean, I was part of that, and it didn't even dawn on me, right? And I know, I mean, the guy that, you know, right outside of town. So it was like, oh yeah, duh. I mean, they have an opinion that we. It's very frustrating for them to work with the city in the tree groupings that we have, and they will come and still chop them down again because that they have obviously reasons why, and they have the rights to be able to do that. I think we should be working as a city to do that. So even if the committee is at 20, I'd love to have their opinion part of that group because I think they hold a huge opinion and a huge thing that the city needs to be thinking about as a partnership with the people that supply our power.
Right.
And why do we want to have a tree that we're always chopping and taking out every 10, 15 years, right? When we can plant maybe a more appropriate tree for underneath those power lines.
So I agree with all that.
Anyway.
And then in response to some of the process, you did a little write-up I read as well. It said a lot of those same things. I think it sounds like the committee's on the right track, not on the calendar-wise, but they're very much on the right track from my perspective. I feel like the committee seems to be trying to find that good balance between, you know, doing what's right by our culture and our trees and our environment with allowing some sensible common sense development. My only concern comes on my favorite part, which is this free market of trees kind of, right? This trading that's taking place is who's administering that, assuming it'd be our planning department. What kind of time and work and effort and hours is going to really go into the, you know, administering something. And I don't think that I've never heard of that being done before. I don't know how often that's done before. I love being the trailblazer. It's kind of neat, but it makes me nervous being the trailblazer because that means we have to figure out all the kind of the pothole, you know, the problems ourselves, right? But I like the direction it's going. It just seems like it needs to be kind of, along with staff, thought through a little bit more. Which,
some comments in that respect, and I wrote it down, so I will pass that on to the committee, so I'm not saying I'm disagreeing with you. We have had to stop the conversation several times within our committee because we do head off on these side trails. And some of the PGE stuff is outside of our developments, and so conversations about highway and streets where you've got power lines and such, that trees that look, they go up and make big circles, and or they cut off at odd. Some of that is outside of our developments, but I think that some of that is also inside our developments. So we'll have to.
Right, most of our developments are underground, but you still have the vaults and that they talked about, and the roots and the type. They're more concerned really about the type of tree that, as being arborists, knowing what that does to their vaults or what that does for growing just in downtown, you know, as we replace things. But
yeah, as a forester, I was thinking about the issues about. We have some trees, and Douglas fir has got a bad habit of them doing this. Ponderosa pine is more of a carrot. It tends to do this. And I was thinking, let's move, because it's also more warm climate, dry climate kind of a species. But your vault issue brings up a good point. And anything else?
I guess my only comment would be, like, if I look at my neighborhood, I'm over in the Sandy Bluff area.
Okay.
And you know, I'm on Coral Burst, and a lot of those homes have these huge maple trees that were put in the dead center of their yards that grow up higher than their houses and completely block and then create a whole host of algae and moss problems on the homes. So I guess my only comment would be that, you know, we start being a little more proactive in our thought process of the type of trees and what that tree is going to look like, not when it's planted and it's this tall, but, you know, when it's grown and what that's going to do to the property. Fortunately, whoever owned my house before I purchased it lopped mine out, so I don't have to contend with that. But yeah.
I don't know if
I have 10 of those lovely maples.
What's that?
I don't know if I'd say
that are over 80 feet tall.
Over 80 feet tall.
Yeah.
Huge, big.
I
I'm sure
hire
they had to ask
Preston's
permission,
kids to
so.
pick up leaves.
Sure. One thing that I didn't describe because I'm conscious of the time, is that we've talked about things like heritage trees. Trees that we wanna keep no matter what, and some of your monster Douglas firs or your maples. This,
Florist
there's a
shop.
walnut tree down here that got cut down the other day. Those are the kind of things that maybe we ought to be thinking about too, that, the trouble is how do you identify those puppies?
Sure.
Takes you lots of time, there's
Sure.
lots of acreages.
Are you looking at other cities? Because I know there's several cities that already have tree plans and maybe we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
We actually have a retired forester from the city of Portland on the committee. Yes, we are.
Good.
And it's not just city of Portland.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
We have West Lynn in there, I'm afraid. He came up, so we have that, and then.
Jordan's from Lake Oswego.
Lake Oswego has one too, yes. And I'll certainly take anything in terms of emails, so, okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes. Our transit committee is meeting Wednesday night, so I'll report on that next time. But one thing I wanted to bring to your attention that's popped up in the last while is that U.S. Forest Service has a program. It's called Community Forest. And what the purpose of that program is, and there's lots of money in it right now, is where there's going to be development if a city or some other kind of local government wants to purchase that property so it isn't developed and it protects the trees, then they will pay a grant that is about 50% of the cost of that property. So our conservation district bought 319 acres of Weyerhaeuser property. We had legislators out on a tour last Friday, that's why I missed the basketball. And the program has a lot of interest.
That is interesting.
So that'd be like our Sandy
Yeah,
River
something
Park.
we might think about.
What about that?
What's the name of
And
that
add it on to that.
program again?
Community Forest.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. Thank you.
All right, I got three things. One of them is a thank you to Murray Smith, Public Works, and Council, and then most importantly for Jordan as well too. You got handed a pretty big task starting this job, and I think we've had to navigate some pretty big challenges that I think there's comments around council avoiding. I think as a city, we've tried to avoid this as well too, and so we're kind of having to come face to face with this thing. And I just want to thank all the support and the folks that came out tonight as well too. So it's not an easy decision to make. It's going to be a tough one. It's going to be painful for all of us, but we'll get through it and it will pass. So two other things, and these are both personal, but I wanted to share because I shared earlier when the mayor and the new councilors joined us. I was in the final stages of finishing my PhD from Oregon State. This morning I got the email that says, congratulations, your degree is awarded. So I'm expecting a name tag change.
Yeah, just say, doctor.
No, I actually,
Go write it on there.
people keep trying to call me Dr. Hamlin at the college, and it's so weird. I don't like it at all. And so, but I can help you. I can't help you with any medical emergencies, but I can help you build an academic plan to go to college as well too. So, and then the last thing, we're gonna be starting.
I think you deserve a little round of applause on that.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, I like it.
And then the last thing, most of you probably know we do a light show at our house, the Sandy Light Show. We're on Facebook. We're getting ready to prep up for Halloween, and I just want to let y'all know we got some new scented fog for this year. So we got scented fog.
It's not from all those vaping things.
It's not. It's not. There's a company called Froggy's Fog, and they have pleasant smelling ones and then less pleasant smelling ones. But we do some fog testing in the neighborhood. And we only had 2 neighbors this time that thought our house was on fire. So, but cotton candy is the winner so far, and then chocolate chip cookie is another one that smells really
You
good.
can sell them right next to it. I smell it.
When Murray Smith does her testing, he'll smell a little different.
Well, but thank you very much.
Oh, all right. So Parks Committee met last Wednesday. You know, they're moving forward obviously with the master plan. There's been some growing interest in the community for pickleball courts.
Oh, yes.
So there was some discussion on that, and hopefully there'll be some forward progress with that with the master plan as well.
Nice.
You know, whether those go in at Tupper or we create a new space or whatever that may be. But and kind of on a side note with that, there was a couple that had come to give kind of public comment on that subject, and interestingly enough, they travel around the country, and everywhere they go, they play pickleball. And
It wasn't my parents, was it?
They were with my parents though, too. My parents might move here if we get pickleball courts, so.
What a lot of cities do is like a checkout program where, you know, for $5 you come pick up the nets and all this, or they have cages at facilities where, you know, you have to get an access code, you pay a fee, so it completely pays for itself, which I thought was pretty interesting. But yeah, so growing interest in pickleball.
It's also something that should be considered at the campus as we.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yep, absolutely. Then, you know, they're also have been working with city staff a little bit on the use of pesticides. I think I mentioned that at a previous meeting. Specifically for like Roundup and Crossbow, recognizing that those are substances that certain areas are banning, certain countries are banning moving forward. So I think they feel pretty solid with the city's current plan with how that is, but in the future, maybe might look to council for some guidance on maybe being a little more proactive, so we can maybe potentially down the road eliminate use of either of those. So that's all I got.
All right. Well, I did reserve my time,
Yeah,
so
you
I have another item.
All right.
So yeah, the PG one was getting that person on there. The other one was last Wednesday. There was the business economic chamber event. We were there, but was talking with Sarah about a program that's coming up for the library. And
So you reserved time and then stole one of my items. That's what happened there.
Yeah.
All right.
About the haunt, and so called the haunt. And so as she was describing and talking to me, I was getting more excited about this, you know, because this is a pretty cool thing, and I hope to hear about this soon, an actual presentation ahead of time. You need to get the word out, and I don't want to steal. Sorry, not yours, but Sarah's thing. You know, this is coming to us from West Lynn in this professional haunt on our community campus coming up. So excited about that. Excited what it can bring to our community and an economic aspect of things, but also, you know, what that means just for tourism and other things, and getting Sandy more well known in many other areas, and maybe it's now the haunt going forward. But anyways, I'll reserve the excitement that she shared with me for her presentation at hopefully soon at another at the next meeting. But if you can't wait, you know, stop her before she leaves.
Mine's pretty quick. Chief Roberts and I will be meeting with Steve Brown with the Mountain Festival Committee on September 23rd to discuss alternative parade routes for the Mountain Festival. So who knows where that ends up, but those discussions are happening. Obviously, highway down the middle of our town gets harder and harder every year as we quickly grow. I just wanted to thank staff in our rec and community services department. Sure, Public Works came into play on this in some different areas on the Rip City Day. I mean, just an outstanding community event. My kids had a lot of good time. My nephews had fun. The mayor had a lot of fun. So it was a great event. Thank you to the Trailblazer organization as well. Jeremy mentioned the haunt coming. It sounds like we'll get more information. Very excited to see the library doing that. A question out to council. It's been kind of we talked about our last council retreat about having another one kind of in a year. Can't believe it, but we are getting close to that now. It's time to be thinking about that. I think probably more exciting on it is that we've actually checked off and completed a lot of the goals that we did. And so I'm looking for to possibly do one here the next couple of months where we go through our goals that we had, probably update them, because a lot of it was like wastewater
phase one, you know, see what the next step is for that and for, you know, transportation of that. But what are we thinking? We want to do another retreat here in the next couple of months? What kind of month do we want to target? Any month to stay away from? Or by December? we don't wanna
December,
do
away
it.
from December.
Right.
Were we doing
January.
like the first part of
We
January?
want to target January for it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where do you do your retreats?
Where do we do them? Vegas.
Be careful there, it might get out.
We actually, we're not able to host it outside of our jurisdiction, because they all have to be public meetings, right? So we actually go over to the fire annex usually. It's where we had our last one, which is right across the street from the fire department. And we post it up and publicize it like all of our public meetings.
You know the oral hall is available.
That's outside the.
Yeah, the problem though is that that's not our jurisdiction. I agree. I can't remember where we were gonna have it last time we couldn't do it. It was over towards Estacada.
Yeah, towards Eagle Creek, what?
Collins.
Collins.
Collins Retreat Center.
Which,
Yeah.
that's where we held it
Yeah,
when I first got on council.
Yeah, yeah,
So.
Rule
breaker.
Yeah, rule breakers. Okay, so we'll start targeting that. Jordan and I will have some conversations on that. Jordan mentioned meeting Thursday on the community campus survey that we're doing. And then finally, this Wednesday morning, 7:30, Chambers Good Morning Sandy is at Avamere. Other than that, I will close tonight's meeting. Thanks, everybody.
I thought you were gonna do it.